And welcome back to This is Dunder Moose. Hey, Unfiltered ID, I see you there in the chat. This is going to be our first time ever streaming to two different locations. You could be watching us on YouTube. You could be watching us on Twitter, or I'm sorry, X.com. Not sure if X.com how that's going to work with the comments, but we'll see. But anyway, I'm excited because I got Mr. John N. McGowan to bring you today, and we're going to be talking about his book that launches tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be coming out tomorrow.
All right. So the book is. Do you know what time it launches? Is it like at noon or first thing
I
in the
think
morning?
I think it's like it might be midnight tonight, but I gotta check with Bookshelf and see what it says. But yeah, it definitely is tomorrow at maybe noon. Let's say.
Right on. And the book is called The Living Campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if you could just, I know some of my viewers also watch another channel that you were on recently, but
Mm-hmm.
just in case we haven't heard about it, just give us like the back of the book. What is the synopsis? What is the back matter for The Living Campaign?
Well, so the Living Campaign is supposed to like kind of compile kind of standards and uh, provide like a format for like a GM to run a campaign in a sandbox style that sort of maximizes player agency, kind of while minimizing kind of their necessary input.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, going by the back matter, that's kind of the whole thing is player freedom and reducing burnout.
Right on. And man, I feel like it's been said a lot, especially recently, but like the thing that tabletop role playing games can do that no other medium can do is that maximizing of player agency.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's something that I feel has been diminished in as we've gone iteration through iteration of the game, which is why I have been like really fascinated with some of these older first principles that we're kind of rediscovering now as
Mm-hmm.
we look back at the source of the hobby and stuff. So let me just ask, first of all, what would you say had the most impact on the way that you play this game today? And when I say this game, also tell us what version you play.
Well, recently, I say recently being maybe in the last like 3 to 6 months, we started playing AD&D First Edition.
Okay.
Previously, before that, I was playing Pathfinder First Edition. Uh, I played like not consistently, but enough to like have a solid grasp of it and enough to kind of like talk shop about it, which would be Fifth Edition. And then, but I learned based on 3.5.
Yeah. So like your first experience was fourth, and then you quickly had a group that went to 3.5, and then
Mm-hmm.
from what I understand, Pathfinder First Edition was very similar. I never played Pathfinder myself, nor did I play 3.5. Um,
Yeah, I mean, colloquially, it's known as D&D 3.75.
okay,
So I've heard it.
3.75.
I've heard it described as that, and I don't think that's inaccurate. So it changes, like, kind of rebalances like a lot of the classes in ways that I think actually are like better than 3.5.
I feel like all of the versions we've talked about though are easier to learn, quicker to learn than AD&D First Edition. I'm personally trying to learn that right now as well. I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I put out a video on what it takes, and so I've got my first edition player's handbook here, making my
Mm-hmm.
way through. I'm going to start the DMG alongside of it next.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like there's just a lot of really targeted sub systems instead of one overarching principle that you apply to everything in the game, which makes it a steeper learning curve, but very granular, tailored for exactly what you want to emulate at the table.
Yes,
Um,
yes. I. So that's kind of, but my experience with it is having kind of, so I mean, Pathfinder being kind of the way it is like very granular in the calculations required.
Hmm.
So for me, kind of going back and learning AD&D, I was like, oh, like I just I just roll on. I just have to like get all my tables in front of me, and like this is so much easier because I'm not having to do like +2, +3, -2, -1, +2, +4. I have a character sheet of a character I ran, and the buffs debuffs like list is like literally kind of takes up its own page.
Yeah.
It is really like kind of seriously outrageous,
Wow.
especially on the player side.
So do you need
Uh,
like Excel to play Pathfinder?
I have an app that auto compiles all of the
Of course.
like kind of all the small additions that I would need to make. But even then, I'd still need to know the circumstantial stuff like flanking.
Mhm.
All like oh, what do I get if they're prone versus like if they're flanking? If I versus so yeah.
And it becomes a question of, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like when you have
Hmm.
so many rules to get a very accurate simulation, um, what does that do to the speed of combat? And what does the pace of combat do to the fun factor? Like, d- do you really want to go attack those orcs, or are you counting the cost going, man, we could explore 4 more rooms and get some treasure, or we could go fight those guys, and that's what we'll be doing the rest of the night. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I did. That's partially kind of what the living campaign was. Is these I applied these principles to my Pathfinder game,
Hmm.
and I ran it like that for 8 months to a year. And in fact, I still have a Pathfinder game that I'm still running. Um,
What was your result when you started applying these principles? Like for you as the DM and also for your players?
a dramatic increase in speed on
Really?
combat. Yeah. Because really, so there's a few principles that like kind of Gary lays out in the DMG that he talks about individual initiatives like specifically in the DMG,
Hmm.
and he's basically like, this would be more realistic or whatever because everybody would be kind of going at like different times. But he posited the scenario, exact scenario you just did, which is, like, do I really want to fight those orcs? Like he kind
Yeah.
of, in his own way, he sort of phrased it that way, and yeah, no, it's not. So like I switched it to a group initiative, which
Ah,
immediately speeds things up.
love
Um,
that. Yeah.
we did it with a D10 because the initiative modifier is like such an integral part to Pathfinder's like core combat system that to take it
Okay.
out might like kind of negatively affect like the overall experience.
It breaks some of the other load bearing rules
Yeah,
in Pathfinder.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's things that are specific to Pathfinder that I think would damage the experience if you were to like kind of just take
Well,
it out
yeah, and
wholesale.
especially if you've got players that like kitted into that, where they were like, I want
Yes.
to. Like I've got a buddy, my brother-in-law, and when we play 5e, he's got like this min-maxed heron gun, which if nobody
Yeah.
knows what a heron gun is, it's a rabbit. Basically, it's just like a rabbit
No, that makes
person.
sense. Uh-huh.
And he pretty much always goes first. He's got such a bonus to his initiative.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, in first edition, Gary's like, because we're doing 1 minute rounds, because the fighting is somewhat abstracted, you're not trying to land every punch and thrust. It's like, no, they fight for a while, and if you get a hit, that represents like you. There was one moment out of the overall tussle and melee where you got to land a shot, like a
Yeah.
boxing match or whatever. And he was like, in a 1 minute round, dexterity really wouldn't impact your initiative as much. So each side just rolls a d6. Um,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
those are some of the kind of decisions you were making as you were saying, okay, well, here's what Gary was doing for his game. Here's what that means for the game we're playing.
Exactly.
But you
And
still saw benefits even in the adjusted use of it.
oh yeah, like we went from maybe 1 or 2 combats a night to 4 to 6,
Nice.
depending. So even in sort of Pathfinders like bloated, it's like everybody doing their turns at the same time. Uh, that's because I don't start adjudicating player monster like interaction until everybody's put in
Yeah.
their orders. So there's
So
no like downtime of like, oh, now I wait 20 minutes for my turn to roll back around or whatever.
yeah, so everyone says, okay, before we roll initiative, what are the good guys doing? And they tell you, and then you
Hmm.
say, here's what the monsters are going to try to do, and then you roll, and then everything that's declared has to happen in the order that the initiative says.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That's how I did it, and it definitely dramatically improved. playability. Like it improved Pathfinder. Like on like if I'm being, you know,
Okay.
uh, that system has some kind of quirks that you do have to kind of eat around. So like it is pretty poorly designed in some ways, like especially in sort of its like kind of later like splat books. But um, yeah, so but yeah, and but once I kind of started doing this, downtime works really well actually with the Pathfinder system because there is a lot of stuff like the Pathfinder retraining rules and like how to like you can kind of reallocate things, and a lot of it costs time and money already. It's like kind of core.
Yeah.
Um, so having a system that sort of like the one-to-one, applying one-to-one to that actually makes those systems like work, and they're not like a drag at the table.
Yeah. See, that's the other. So you get a complaint when people try to say, "Well, you should try one-to-one time." And the one of the complaints I've heard, and I
Mm-hmm.
felt this way too when I first heard about it, was, "Oh, well, that's just going to be a chore to keep track of, and why would you want to, burden yourself with the boring stuff?"
Mm-hmm.
And then I read, and I was trying to learn fifth edition, and I was reading about downtime, and downtime means something completely different when you're not in using one-to-one time. Like
Yeah,
downtime means you're role playing when you come back. And there's almost this like assumption that you're going to role play everything.
yeah,
And like you get to these scenes where everybody knows it's slow and cringe and everybody knows it wants to move to the next story beat. But here I am playing shopkeep number 4, trying to find some other quirky accent or face to make while I talk. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
here's and then people are trying to work in their character. There's an example. I please forgive me. I played with some friends over across the pond in England, and we were playing fifth edition, and
Mm-hmm.
he played one of the big praying mantis people. What are they called? Uh, Thrykeen or Thrykreen or something. He was a bug. He was a big bug man,
Yeah.
and in his backstory, he was exploring the world of men, and so like every pickin' NPC we talked to, he would launch into these huge questions about agriculture and why do you fence in the ground meat, and he called the birds sky meat, and like we were all just stuck watching the scene, watching the poor GM just try to come up with how would this little halfling farmer who's terrified of the monsters explain agriculture to a bug?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like,
Right.
"Hey, Black Lodge, how's it going? Good to see you guys."
Oh.
I got to watch. I wasn't live, but I got to watch your episode about being on Reddit today while I was spreadsheeting at work. So I appreciate you guys for getting me through a boring section of my day. Um, but yeah, with one-to-one time,
Uh-huh.
like downtime really is downtime where it's like, okay, what did you guys do this week? And they give you their shopping list. You're like, okay, you had to find that stuff at 3 different stores. Here's how much it cost you. And it's just good to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my that's kind of my big push for it because my sort of concern with uh kind of one-to-one and like downtime and like why I try to push it so hard is because like how many times have you like you hear about the guy who's like who does those things. Okay,
Mm.
that's fun for him, but it's not fun for everybody else.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and so like
Well, there's
I
that
don't.
infamous episode of Critical Role, right? Where there was a dude doing that, and like that was his last episode. Like he was
Yeah.
off the show after that.
Oh man, I actually I watched like most of season 1
Oh, okay.
like but yeah, no, that was when I was kind of I was still like I was like trying to that's around the time I started like looking how to like run a better campaign, like get
Yeah.
seriously much better. But yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Yeah, I that's why I really pushed that because like there needs to be like you need something for those people.
Yeah.
And what does is it provides a space for those people to kind of have that fantasy that they want.
Hmm.
Like the edge lord he could be the loner edge lord. Like, that's not
Yeah.
it's not a sin with one-to-one
It's almost
because
like
he'll get it out.
little micro bursts of solo play. I mean, you're reacting with the DM like
Hmm.
through text messages or whatever, but
Hmm.
like you don't have to make everyone else at the table wait while you you know, get some socks or whatever you need.
Yeah, yeah, right. Like if that part is fun for you, that's totally cool. But it's in its own space, and you're not kind of like inflicting it on everybody else.
And it
Um,
also sets up little surprises too.
mhm.
Stuff that happens while not everybody's at the table that like can come out in your next session and nobody else but you and the DM knew about that. And then everyone can be like, what? Whoa, like oh, there's so many good things about one to one time.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. Like really, the only like complaint I ever hear about it that like I don't like. I'm not gonna say it has teeth, but it's really more like I get why you'd be concerned about this. Is the what if you stop time in the dungeon? I know it's
Yeah.
or what if you keep going? What if you end session in the dungeon? I know that's like it's been answered to death. Like, but like I also understand, not everybody is like kind of swimming in these circles.
That's true. We are a niche of a niche, right?
We're a niche of a niche, so I try to be with that question. At least I try to be as patient as I possibly can be, and I
Yeah.
will explain it every single time as long as it's not to the same people. And so yeah, so it's like I get that, but like it's really kind of small potatoes. Like just figure
Hmm.
out how to get out of the dungeon, and even then, I just sidestep the issue completely because like I tell my players like, yeah, you can end session in the dungeon. I will roll. That's usually a good opportunity for me to like solo play. And I'll just
Yeah.
be like, okay, like I run your characters. If they die, I hope they don't die,
Yeah.
and they typically they're like, oh yeah, I don't know if I like that, and they try to get out.
That's right. Well,
But
once you get everyone in the mindset, though, it's not an imposition. Like everybody
no.
knows. Usually, you have a caller or somebody, and they're like, "All right, guys, well, it's getting like 11:45. It's almost midnight. Maybe we should pack up our loot and head back."
Hmm.
And like, unless there's some other thing to wrap up. But the thing is that's where we kind of get into those principles of no prep play, where if the dungeon is a story and it has certain beats laid out
Hmm.
and you're like part of the adventure is a ticking time clock or something like that. I can see why, if that's the way you're used to playing, somebody saying, well, no, we're just going to abandon the quest for the night and come back next week. People will be like, well, that will ruin everything, right?
Yeah, because they still sort of think about it in terms of like my agency ends with the evening,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
really, what it really they should be thinking is like, great, now I have all this downtime, and now I have loot, and now I can
Yeah.
do all kinds of stuff I want to do. I could really ruin some people's times topside.
Exactly. Or you can research so you know what you're coming up against next time you go in the dungeon.
Yeah. All
Um,
right.
but the thing is, when people ask me, what about ending in a dungeon? My question is, well, what about someone who can't make it next week? And if you do pause it while they're in the dungeon,
Hmm.
do you have to teleport their character out, swap them with someone else that showed up that wasn't here last week, or are
That
they
is
just
you.
like a mindless drone just walking along while everybody else plays? There's it's. I think it solves a problem rather than creates more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like any kind of solution that you apply to a thing, especially when you're like trying to simulate something, you're not going to. There are things that might be lost, like some resolution that might be lost in other places, but you gain it right back,
Yeah,
you know, in different spots. And I think those spots are probably more important. Like I haven't ever since I started applying these principles, I haven't skipped a session
yeah,
in since I started applying them. No, not as any sessions I didn't want to have. Like we stopped for the holidays, and that
yeah.
was mostly because like we don't have. I'm the DM for one of my groups, and we have multiple DMs in the other group, but so it really was not a big deal to them. But yeah, so it was kind of one of those things where I was the guy who was like, okay, sorry guys,
Yeah.
but
So if
it's
you
Christmas.
canceled, nobody was playing,
Yeah,
but if it was on, it was on.
it was on. Yeah, if I could do it, and if I had at least two people, I could do it with one, but two is more fun, you know.
Yeah.
So if I had at least two people, I'd run the session. I always had at least two.
So, hey Muck Duck, welcome. Um, it sounds like it was a success, right?
Hmm.
Like I don't know if there was a transition period while your players got used to the changes you were making, but you said you played this for what was it, 8 months or a
Hmm.
year.
Yep. And we're just kind of now switching to AD&D.
Yeah. So
Um,
obviously you didn't turn everybody off and they didn't, run away, but also they didn't just get bored and drop it, because I
mm-mm.
feel like a lot of times when the game is lacking, people will tell you, "Well, I don't have time to play. I wish I could. We just can't make it." And like
Yeah,
I sometimes that's legit, because I mean I play with a bunch of dads and we all got we got jobs, we got kids, and we're just sometimes that's just life. But
of
I think
course.
sometimes I wonder if like, oh, we can't make it is really just this isn't that fun. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like,
Hmm. Oh,
so
good heavens! Just look at my wrist. I have to leave. Yeah.
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So you've been playing with these concepts for a while. At
Huh?
what point does this become the project that you're releasing tomorrow? At what point do you think, okay, I want to put together the things that I'm seeing here in a way that I can share with other people?
Well, I once I figured out that there was something here, I started the project. So
Hmm.
I started it very early, kind of probably earlier than I should have. Because as I sort of went through and I was like, I wrote like, my first manuscript is I pretty much had to like junk it after like, a month of play, another month of play. And then you kind of, went through several editing processes. So yeah, I pretty much started it right away because I knew there was something there. Like I
Hmm.
knew I like all of the burnout I was feeling, even though without switching systems, all the burnout I was feeling was gone.
Yeah.
So like you can't really get around that. Like
There's something powerful there.
yeah, yeah, and by itself, that was sort of worth the price of admission. So, around the table group, like they're not. This is sort of like both all of their sort of first experience
Hmm.
with like D&D or D&D adjacent.
Oh, so you like
System.
recruited people that weren't into role playing to do
No,
this stuff?
yeah, and they
Wow.
they came in, and we were playing sort of a more guided campaign of like, go to the next quest or whatever. I always I was told that I was very good at kind of providing a sandbox experience, even though it really wasn't.
Hmm. Well, they
Um,
couldn't tell, right?
they couldn't tell,
They
and they
felt
legit couldn't
agency.
tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, they felt that agency pretty much even before I was doing this. But
Well, cool.
it takes it out of you to
Yeah.
provide that experience. So I switched from we were playing weekly. I was like, we need to do it every other week because I can't take it anymore. you know,
Yeah.
and I have a decent work ethic, so I'm somewhat resilient to that feeling. Like that's just kind of like whatever. Like I'm flawed in many ways, but that is not one of them. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of when I knew, like, once the burnout was gone, I knew, like, okay, I have to start this project because that by itself. So even my IRL group, like, they're not super active in the downtime, but that's fine.
Yeah.
So they're as active as they need to be. Like they feel like okay, like it's there if I need it. So
Hmm.
it's like they're not, and they show, and they're there every session.
So they're not blowing your phone up,
No,
but
the
um,
the online group is blowing my phone up. They're very active in the downtime. They
yeah.
love it.
Okay. And you're
So
still not burning out, because it seems like you're probably getting a lot more between session interactions than you had before.
oh yeah, I this is how I describe it. Uh, it is not like all that time that you were spending writing notes and doing these like quest trees and all that
Hmm.
stuff. That time, like you are now spending kind of interacting with your friends during the week.
Yeah.
Like it is.
Yeah.
It's not. You know,
That's a good
I'm
way
an
to put
accountant.
it.
I'm an accountant by training. So I do sort of think of things as in terms of like assets, equity, and liabilities. So it's not like when you spend an asset, that it changes form.
Hmm.
So if I liquidate an asset, it turns into like I could turn it into equity, and that's kind of what I that's the way I picture. Yeah,
I've got an MBA, so you're speaking my language. I just love it. That's what it's come to on this show right now.
good, good. I hope I'm very excited about it, everybody. So I really hope you're as excited as I am about accounting. And
Yeah.
so, but no, I see it as like it is that time is always going to be spent. It was always going to be spent, but the
Yeah.
form in which it is spent is now different, and it is now
So
different in a way that's productive.
one of my favorite writers, my favorite fiction writer is a man named Gene Wolfe, and he once talked about what it was like to write science fiction short stories, and he said it was like casting rose petals into the Grand Canyon. because
Mm.
you just have this beautiful little thing that you love, and you just cast it out, and you just never hear back. You don't know if people enjoyed it or not. Um, so I think the former style of DMing that you were describing, where you're just like all by yourself at your keyboard or with a notebook, and you're just creating this stuff that maybe is entertaining and pleasing for you, and then hoping that your players consume it. Like that's like the
Hmm.
completion of that creation process is are they going to play it? Are they going to be surprised? Are they
Yeah.
going to think it's fun? And that's like your accounts receivable, which
Hmm.
may or may not get paid off, right? And then
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah, 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 yeah.
let's not do the accounting thing. What basically is you put all this investment in, and then like it can be very defeating when they have absolutely no interest in the thing that you were most excited about. And
Yeah.
it's like being in a conversation where you want to say something, but it's never your turn, and you have the weight of the unexpressed creation that you made.
Yes.
And I think that, at least for me, that contributes to burnout in a way that I can't really quantify physically. It's not physically tiring. It's not like you lifted a bunch of weight or anything, or ran, but it's just like keeping all of that in RAM. You know,
Hmm.
there's a burden there.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, I I got something for that. I was going to answer Black Lodge
oh
there.
yeah, yeah. Let me get that up there.
Um, so
And for
the
those of
in-person.
you listening that aren't able to read because you're in the car or whatever, the question is your in-person group running multiple characters or just a single party in one-to-one time?
Uh, so yeah, the in-person group started with just their kind of characters when we sort of transitioned over, but then as like those characters got busy, they had to create more. So they have multiple characters now. And yes, yes, Muktuk.
Yeah, sorry, I had to throw that up there. Um, yeah,
Um,
I don't see one-to-one time. Like eventually, people will have to have multiple characters,
mhm,
and so like my experience in Trilopolis, there's like 3 different DMs in that group. So just by that, I got a lot of practice making characters, and then of course they die very frequently.
mm,
We were doing some mudcore stuff when I joined Trilopulus, so it was good practice on learning the rules for playing multiple characters and stuff.
sure. Um,
Let me ask about Pathfinder.
sure.
Um, One of the things about first edition is you kind of roll up your stats, and then you have to pick your class to match that. It's not like
Hmm.
a point buy or a standard array allocation where you get a concept in your mind for who you want to play and then build that character. It's more like,
Right.
okay, here's what you're born with. Your best bet is to be a fighter this time
Hmm.
around, or a thief. Um, and then you get practice playing the other styles as you make those other characters.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, and Pathfinder, obviously, kind of the kind of order de jour is the point. It's point by like that. That's sort of the accepted. Um,
So it's of the school of I've got a concept for a character, and the system will let me build them the way I want to.
yeah, yeah, it
More or less.
does. And
Okay.
I know there's some some people don't really like that, but I pitched AD&D to my online group, and they're like, no, we really like building characters. They
Yeah.
like this. It is a meta game, and some would argue, worse than kind of getting good, as they
Hmm.
say. Uh, which I mean, that's probably valid to some extent, but there's a sort of like autistic math nerd thing of like
Yeah.
wanting to stack bonus on bonus and bonus and
Yeah. Yeah.
make number go big, you
Yep.
know.
And that's what my brother-in-law does with his Heron Gun character. Like it is insane.
Yeah, and there's
Mm.
something to that, and that's why like I don't, you know, I think AD&D sort of does this style the best because it's sort of the perfect mix of complicated and simple.
Yeah.
Or it is the best mix of complicated and simple I've encountered so far. Uh, so because I have like it's funny my the online people that we've been gaming together for 15, 20 years at this point, um, and AD&D is like that was very difficult for them to grasp. The
Yeah.
people who don't have that background in gaming, my IRL group, they picked it up much faster to the point to where there's like they were like, oh great, we can get rid of Pathfinder now. Like it wasn't
It was no
it like
hardship for them to let go of that.
no.
Cool.
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like kind of the professions they have. Like we got electrician type people. I have a few exotic animal trainers, to the point where if I told you which exotic animal, it would dox me.
Oh wow.
Um, and you know, it's so like they have like kind of an eclectic like professional like skill set in
Hmm.
that kind of in person group that I think uh really sort of like AD&D just speaks to much easier. I don't know why.
Well, and they don't have the comfort zone that people that have played the other way for a long time have to get over, right? Like they don't have to unlearn before they pick it up. They're like, "Oh, this one's like this one's like this. Okay, we'll try this one," you know. Whereas like if someone who has played these games until it becomes part of their identity, if you suggest to them that they may be playing it in a suboptimal way, I'm not going to use the W word, but
Mm.
that if you're playing it in a way that could be better, like that's not just oh, I'm interested, I want to try it. That's like a, you mean I've been a fool all these years? How dare you? You know,
Yeah, yeah, and you can't
it's
take it
humility.
personally. You
Hmm.
can't take it personally because, like, I don't necessarily disagree with that. Like, once I kind of learn AD&D, I've realized how tired I am of Pathfinder's quirks. Um,
Yeah,
I do think AD&D sort of fits my mindset a little better. But my some of my players disagree, and I can't. You can drag that horse to water. I can't make them drink though.
yeah.
So they're fundamentally just like, no, we won't do it. And that's fine. That's fine. I had like, these are my friends.
Hmm.
They've some of them were in my wedding. so
Gotcha.
so I it is not. There's no hard feelings there. But to answer Muck Tuck's question, um,
You want to read the question out loud for our audio only friends?
oh sure, of course. Uh, I would have thought Pathfinder'd be a pain in the arse to run domain war games in. How did John find it? And to answer that question, it takes some massaging. Um, I recommend Joy of Wargaming's kind of videos on scaling up. So that video is done with AD&D, but the sort of the design, like then the underlying derivative design, still functions in like descendant systems.
Hmm,
So Pathfinder, all of the things that like the people can like that you can do at the skirmish layer in Pathfinder still works at the war games layer. So
cool.
I do play Pathfinder as a war game with just sort of 10 soldiers per block or whatever.
Is it fun
Um,
that way?
yeah, yeah.
Are because like that's one of the things I feel like the people, that's like the dream, is the battle of the five armies, right? And like
Hmm.
everyone's got their own faction they're leading. Um, but how does it play out when you, like, are your players going nuts, or is it just feel like another combat, or what?
They're going nuts. So I had a domain player. Oh, thank you, Eric.
Rock on,
Um,
man.
uh, I had a domain player who had he had a castle ruin that he fixed up, and it became sort of the a settlement kind of formed around it. Uh, he found, this is I rolled random. He found two of like the purest gold mines in the kingdom.
Hmm. Okay.
You know, and so he's like, "Oh boy, I have all this money. Oh no, I have all this money, and all my neighbors want it." Because you can't like you basically like the church kind of showed up with their hands out.
Yep.
The local nobles are kind of like, no, actually, like my family lineage goes back to this point. You should be serving me. Like he was
He got
getting fought
MC
over.
hammered.
Yeah, yeah. It was basically like everybody's like pulling him in all these directions, and he's this tiny little lord who is trying to like kind of hold it together and kind of maintain his fief.
Oh
And
man.
so an army like it ended up sort of escalating to the point where an army of like 500 met like combined like men at arms and
He was
archers.
Thorin. He was Thorin back in the mountain.
Yeah, 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 exactly. And so the lead up was basically like, yeah, he had his like his information people coming to him and being like, "There's this army like that's coming. We've got like a week." And so yeah, and like the excitement was palpable. Like it was not, like the downtime orders were coming fast and furious about all the things he was doing. And then came the day of the session when they arrived. We ran the combat, and there was probably 800 to almost 1,000 soldiers
Oh
involved.
man.
And
That's so cool.
this is in Pathfinder First Edition, and it took us about 2.5 hours to complete. And so they were able to basically loot the battlefield and all this stuff, and that is just from scaling up.
Did he
The game.
wind up still in control of the gold at the end of the fight, or did someone take it from him?
Yeah, he called in some favors, and he had like a core of like flying spellcasters raining fireballs. So it turned into sort of a bloodbath.
So yeah, he had some warthogs in the sky. Some.
Yeah, they didn't have air support, kind of quite like he did. They had a few spellcasters that were able to like block a few. It was like maybe 8 or 9, but his spellcasters were significantly stronger. So uh,
That's
he was getting a
amazing.
little more bang for his buck. But yeah, it took us like didn't take us too much time, and it it was a very dramatic sort of like how it played out.
How did the players respond? Like
They were going nuts. They were losing their minds. They
the
had a great
people that
time.
won were probably pretty thrilled. The people that lost, were they like frustrated, or were they like still grinning? Or
Oh no, these were NPCs.
oh, okay, gotcha.
These were NPCs, so they
I
were.
got
It
I
was
got
all.
Battle Bronstein on the brain. Sorry, I'm going back to Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm very somewhat like for my IRL stuff. I'm very selective and kind of
Hmm.
who like the first line of defense is having a filter. Um,
Did you have fun?
oh, I had a blast. I had a great time.
Yeah.
So it was like moving all the soldiers around. Just like I had like my own little feints and surprises. Like one of the like a good chunk of like the army basically ambushed like another part of their army.
Hmm.
It was very cool.
Nice. So how much of your book deals with this large warfare, the mass battles, the domain aspect, versus like just the basics of one-to-one time and multiple characters and that kind of thing?
I devote so going back here. There's two. The book is in two parts.
Hmm.
So part one is like purely instructional. Do this, do that. Um, and so like page 64 is approaching mass combat. The chapter is approaching mass combat. And it sort of describes the methods that I was talking about and kind of what to expect, and like kind of the rule of thumb you should probably have when applying these to whatever rule set you choose. So I call it the foundational rule set. So
Okay.
I do allow for other rules. I actually make no reference to any specific one
Okay.
um, throughout, because I imagine this would work just fine at 5e. I know it works in Pathfinder, I know it works in AD&D, so I don't see why it wouldn't work. Yeah, I definitely want to get Axe.
So Black Lodge, I'm assuming you probably already got access to the PDFs for Acts 2 if you backed the Kickstarter hashtag Poplar Crowd. But yeah, I feel like that is one of those things. That's one of the promises that tabletop role playing games can offer that other media can't. I mean,
Right.
war games could too. Like 40K or BattleTech or whatever. But the marrying up of the ongoing story and the drama of the characters that are moving through it, and then when
Mhm.
war sweeps in, everything is just heightened, and that just seems to be like one of the most engaging things for players to think about, like to look forward to on game night, and then to talk about with their friends after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, we still talk about that battle. Like that was one. We've had maybe 3 or 4 mass combats at this point. There was like a very large orc raid that they were kind of trying to sack a town that they
Hmm.
were defending, and they had to rally the militia. Um, and so they spent a lot of their downtime like kind of like building palisades and trying to get like ramshackle walls set up around this sort of small village.
Yeah.
Um, um, but yeah, and the book sort of part one, like I got distracted. I apologize. Part one sort of was talking about sort of what to do, and then part two sort of defends. Part two is all kind of a defense of everything I told you what to do in part one.
Okay.
So the
So
other half of
when
the
you wrote it with the mindset that there are going to be people that look at this stuff and maybe don't accept it right off the bat, and are like, why would you ever do it that way? So you put a section in, kind of not just saying how to do it, but like to explain the benefits of it.
correct, yeah, and I tried to take a tone of being understanding of their objections.
Okay.
So it's sort of I am very sort of passionate when I'm talking like any sort of debate. I try to steel man the other position, and so when I present the alternative, like when I present the scenario as like they're concerned about it, talk about their instincts in ways or like this is what you're expecting, this is what you like, this is what you'd like. It can work for this, but this is what you're like. This was what could happen. These things will prevent this, like prevent the
Yeah.
failure state, and that's part two.
So when you were writing the book, was it, or when you were thinking about, like maybe even before you had the idea for the book, was there one specific breakthrough or idea or perspective that you had that you were like, I need to share this, and then the rest of the book followed that? Like, what was, like, if you had to boil it down to maybe not the main point because those can develop later, but what was like the first point that you really wanted to express when the idea of making a book came to you?
It was after reading Tony Batt's Ancient Wargaming.
Oh, okay.
So I actually do. I don't have a background in war games. Most of, like, what is it? I would say that my all of my experience with war games is like academic. Like I've read the literature the other war gamers are reading.
Okay.
And so I read Tony Batt's Ancient Wargaming probably 2 or 3 times at this point. But
Oh, wow.
the
So
Hyborian campaign is a
Shadow over
proto.
Studenka told me I needed to read that. Sounds like if you've read it 3 times, it sounds like that's a must purchase, huh?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like you, the reason I was even able to sort of like when I heard about like 1-to-1 and sort of like the kind of the big sticking points of this kind of this niche, I was already primed for it with the Hyborian campaign.
Okay. Thanks for
Um,
explaining. So I feel like I stepped on a point you were about to make in
oh no,
my
you're fine.
single.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
yeah. That's how it works. It's a conversation. Um, Tony Bass Ancient Wargaming recommended to everybody. Uh, Tony, Mr. Bath was running a war games campaign that doesn't sound dissimilar to a kind of Bro SR Trollopolis campaign. The Hyborian campaign
Cool.
sounds very, very similar, but it takes place in the 50s, or the 60s, or whatever, like whenever their sort of wargaming groups were active. Gygax and Arneson would have been aware of the London wargamers.
Okay.
Um,
Tendy Boy says, I feel like the Hyborian campaign is often overlooked in our circle.
I think that like there probably is something to that. Honestly, like it gets talked about. I know. It was recommended it was I think a video with again Joy of Wargaming
Mm-hmm.
because I think he sort of connected it through that um, as well. So
All right. So you're reading Tony Beth, maybe for the
hmm
third time,
hmm yeah.
and something strikes you.
Oh right, sorry. Yeah, the so I was looking at that, and you can see sort of the bones of what would become the D&D campaign. But the Hyborian campaign is so grand and such a spectacle with letters going from like his friends like all over the country in these big clubs, and you're looking at it, you're like, there needs to be something for this, And then once I sort of got into running 1-to-1, I was Discord and all that makes all this possible. Like we can have our version of the Hyborian campaign,
Yeah.
and the best way I think to do that, that's why I wanted to lay down sort of like wanted to write the book for all these systems because I think these systems can coincide. So like when I had characters plane shift to from my Pathfinder campaign to a 5e campaign, those characters all got converted to 5e characters.
Nice.
So it was basically like the world, like the physics and the magic of the world that they transported to is different. They are now different, and if they wanted all their stuff back, they'd have to come back to my game.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we ran it, and it was pretty cool. Like it really wasn't like it expanded their options. So anyway, so yeah, that's kind of what I was like. I wanted to write this down. That was when I figured it out. I basically finished Ancient Wargaming, and I said, let's go.
Let's go. And
I'm gonna
then
take my attempt at it.
what was the because it sounds like you wrote the book with the perspective of the dissenters in mind. Is
hmm
there one argument that you were like especially concerned that you address well as you express these things? Like, is there one
Uh,
point that you were like was forefront on your mind? Like, this is the either like the most accurate criticism of this play style, or just the one that you think people were most passionate and maybe misunderstood?
Definitely 1-to-1.
Okay.
Like not even close. I think I spend like, page for page. I think I spend the most time on 1-to-1. So even in sort of the instructional part, because it's like you have to really kind of set up what you're supposed to do, um, or a method of what you're supposed to do, and then all so all that time that you're kind of spending like do this, do that. Um, I have to basically defend every single point that I made in part one. So I spend maybe 15, 20 pages on 1-to-1 out of a 150-page book. So
Who were you picturing as the person you were explaining it to? Were you reacting to the reactions of your players as you introduced it and like what their common gripes were? Or were you thinking of like ankle biters on Twitter?
I was thinking mostly the ankle biters on Twitter. Um, I was thinking about mostly them.
They're living rent free in our brains, y'all.
They're living rent free. Well, here's the like my sort of perspective is like to maybe this think of this what you will, but I kind of respect sort of the passion, like the just
Yeah.
the dogged, like, no, I'm going to hold on to my perspective. There's some I do have some respect for that. I'm still going to attempt to dislodge it.
Yeah.
It's that respect keeps me from losing my mind, but
I respect the ones that stand their ground and make a good case, but stay
yes,
connected. The
yes.
ones that I have, it really, it's hard for me to respect the ones that. Well, let me not put it that way. It's hard for me to respect the behavior of getting in a really powerful zinger, dropping the mic, and then blocking them before they can come back. You
Oh
know,
no, I disavow. I disavow.
I'm not asking you to disavow anyone.
No, I know. I'm playing.
I'm
Hey,
just
I
like
have
it's
no.
just
I
frustrating
hate that.
when you're enjoying a good debate with somebody that you respect that you know disagrees with you, and you guys are
Yeah.
both making strong points,
Hmm.
and then the other side is just like, this conversation is over and you do not have the ability to reach out to me and explain yourself or even apologize. It's just cut off, short, done, So
Yeah, it's deeply annoying. It's one of like uh maybe one of another way that I feel that the good Lord has blessed me is that for whatever reason I don't feel any sort of I don't hold on to like Twitter beef.
yeah.
Like it's like to me like a lot of these people like don't even have their faces on, so it's like this could be like an algorithm. It's like
Yeah,
like I have no idea if this is like AI just like trying to get a rise out of me into some like bot farm.
that's a good
um
point. I need to get there because I take it personal when I'm like, well, I want people to like me, right? And like, I want to be
mhm.
passionate about the stuff that I'm interested in, but I don't want it to hurt the relationship. And I just got to realize there's a lot of people that are out there that are not into the relationship at all. They just want to have their say and nuke anyone that disagrees with them,
I
or
mostly
nuke by association people that may be okay but are friends with someone that hurt their fifis once upon a time.
Yeah, I in my like that was something I always that was something that like behavior that sort of uh bothers me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that's always been bothering me. Um uh yeah, it's like a lot of
Well,
things.
it's something weird that I've noticed in the Bro SR because like people that are almost identical. Like I've had two episodes, and everybody involved knows about this, so I'm not like spilling any secrets or anything. Like I had two episodes in a row where both of my guests were beefing with Rick Stump, who's like the first guy, right? The first guy that ever gave me like the reason I have a channel is because he was like, "Hey, you should do this, and I'll be your first guest." And it's
Uh-huh.
like I have great relationships with both sides, and they are just like cutthroat. Like, I mean, Gelatinous Rube said the most explicit thing that's ever been on my channel.
Yeah, well, I mean that's
I'm
his
like,
style though. Like he's kind of
yeah.
always been that way.
Well, and they'll fight to the death, but they love
Yeah.
each other and they're like buddies and they're like worried about each other behind. And it's so weird to me. It's so weird. I got to deprogram because I'm just like, no, we need to be nice. And it's like, no, these guys aren't nice to each other, but they respect each other. And if you look at the way they play the game, like the Venn diagram is a perfect circle, maybe like a vaporwave circle where there's like the tiniest crescent on either side. But like,
Yeah.
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 Anyway,
There's like I have no issue with that. Like my I like the thing that I what is it? Like I try to credit people that sort of influenced me to some extent. You know,
yeah,
I try to so in like my inaugural tweets, like I kind of like my inaugural thread. the first one I did, the first tweet is
Mhm.
dedicated to like talking to like thanking the people that got me to where I even wrote the book in the first place.
Right
I
on.
didn't start my Twitter account until I had a manuscript complete.
Okay.
Um, so I've been working on this for a while, uh, and so yeah, if that gets me like some blocks or whatever, like, that's fine. Like I have no, like, I'm not gonna disavow people that were like that did help.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and there just comes a time where you can try your best and it's just not going to work out. And it's like,
yeah,
you
that's
know what?
fine.
Best to just run your flag up the pole and say, this is who I am. This is who I associate with.
Uh-huh.
I can't, not everything they've said may have been something that I would have said to your face or whatever, but like, this is my tribe and I run with them. And if that means I got to catch a block collateral damage, okay, then. But it's just, I don't know. Maybe I'm just too old, Gen X, not used to this whole thing.
Mm.
I'm late to the D&D game. I'm late to the Twitter game. Um, it's just weird to me. And I'm like, all right, you guys I'm not going to try and be a peacemaker between people that are having fun fighting. I'm just going to be like, all right, well, just as long as everybody knows that I'm going to be cool with people that you're not cool with, but that doesn't mean that we're not cool. That's the best
Yeah,
I can do, right?
yeah, that's the best you can do. I told this story on Rolling Bones, but I think it's fun. It was a very formative experience. I think about it often. Is going to the county fair with my buddies. One of them brings his girlfriend, and we're just being awful to each other, like just calling each other like names,
Yeah.
like you're questioning each other's manhood,
Oh
like
yeah.
it's like we're just being like we're extremely vulgar, and it eventually like we got 2 or 3 hours into the thing, and she just stops. She's like, "Would you guys stop being so awful to each other?" And we close ranks, and we tell her how it's
It
going
was
to
like,
be.
whoa.
Yeah, hey, whoa, whoa, whoa! You don't get to like police our friendship.
Yeah.
Like you need to chill out. And even like my buddy, her boyfriend, is like, "Yeah, babe, you're gonna have to chill out."
He like takes her aside. He's like, you just offended everyone.
yeah, yeah,
Told them to be
yeah.
nice to each other.
Uh,
Oh,
he started making fun of her too. Like, I mean, it
yeah.
didn't last. She didn't stick around, but
Hey, Mr.
you know.
Wargaming, welcome to the chat, bro. Good to have you with us.
Oh, hey, hey, hey.
Um, so yeah, I feel like we kind of got off track a little bit. Let's share how people can follow your stuff because the book is it up for pre-order yet or is it just
I guess so. Eric said he just ordered it,
okay.
so yeah, maybe it is.
Well,
Like,
I'll
let me
I'll
check real
throw
quick.
these up and I'll be searching for the link and see if I can get that up there as well. And but so if you guys want to follow John on Twitter, or it's called x.com, but if you grab the link off of their own webpage, it still says twitter.com. But it's McGowan John N.
Hmm.
And then if you want to follow along on his Substack, tell us about the Substack while I look up this Amazon link.
Sure. So the Substack is kind of a place for me to write uh, some pulp fiction of my own. We there's it's sort of rough out there for literature, so I don't know how good I am, but I'm doing my best, and I'm going to get better. Uh, and I also sort of post more like long form like article content of like running the game or sort of my thoughts on like kind of the greater hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Eventually, the story chapters will be behind a paywall. Um, but the DM advice and like hobby stuff is always going to be free. I'm never going to paywall it because it's important that I want to share that kind of with everybody. But the more like fiction, like having fun, I think eventually that like once I'm gonna get a few chapters out there, and then everything after that is it's gonna be on a subscribe.
Right on. All right, so it is up to pre-order. I got the link both in the chat and it's on your screen right now.
Oh,
If you want to go
fantastic!
to Amazon, and I would ask if you guys do buy a copy, please make sure to follow up and leave that review because it really helps get the word out. It helps spread awareness and get the book in front of more eyeballs. So yeah.
Black Lodge will answer your question.
Are you
So,
writing pulp, short stories, or longer form?
It will be serialized, so I plan on releasing a chapter at a time. And and eventually it will be kind of compiled. Like once I have like a complete arc or whatever, I am going to put it into a novel as well. So I'm trying to figure out kind of exactly like what I'd like to like promise people. As far as that goes, like maybe something for like if I have subscribers, like maybe find out how to get them a copy because they're already subscribed. I'm not going to double dip on people, but yeah. So that's the plan.
Right on. All right. So, what else do we need to know about this book? Like we might have some people that are like, "Man, this sounds kind of good. I'm on the fence." Who is your intended audience? Who did you write this book for?
So, that's a great question because the audience was kind of the thing I was the most concerned about, and the people I wrote this for. The very first chapter, I sort of carve out a space of saying like, okay, this book, theater kids, all of the material in existence is for like a theater like type mind, and I have no problem with that. I do not resent them. They need to have fun too. Like I'm friends. Like
They
that's
do
what
have
hung.
fun too.
And they actually do really like doing like playing the way they play, and I have no problem with that. Like I was friends with those people in high school, and friends with some of them now. And yeah, so it's
Some of
like
my
there's not
best friends are theater kids.
some of my best friends are theater kids. Yeah, no, unironically though.
Were you a theater kid?
I was not. I never
No,
had a
you're
mind
the
for it.
accounting kid.
I was the accounting kid. I just for whatever reason I've just been able to get along with kind of multiple types of people.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
never I've never had a problem like being patient. Um
Fluid. He
Maybe
says,
have less
Raymond, he says
you
they
know
need to have less fun.
yeah, and I respect that too. I do have very strong like moral standards. So don't worry, I'm not wishy washy on everything. But in this particular instance,
I was a theater kid. I enjoyed
yeah,
doing like improv and theater games and stuff. Not really. I got cured of it in college. Like I was doing plays in high school, and then in
hmm
college, I was hanging around people that were in the theater department, and I
hmm
was an English major. I studied my own native language. The good news is I'm fluent. Ask me an English word, I bet I know it. But
nice.
so I was just doing like student run theater and just having a blast with it.
hmm
But there's like something that like spores. They say when you go to Hollywood, you got the spores where like everyone's just got that dream and they don't have a good way of looking at themselves and knowing if they really measure up. Like there were kids that like if you could be a theater major, but if you wanted to be a performance major, you had to audition before the entire like all the professors, and they got
hmm
to decide who had the chops to actually be a performance major and who was going to like be building sets and working on crew and like all the other stuff that goes along with theater. And
hmm
there were kids that were like applying every semester like all the way up to their senior year, and they never got accepted. And like they were like, okay, well, I've
hmm
just got to really work on my monologue, and the next time I will. And it's like,
hmm
if you can't make it past this podunk college professorships, what makes you think when you hit Hollywood and you're going up against the best in the entire world? I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah,
I just felt like there was a lot of self delusion, and it made me reflect on myself too as an English major. I my dream was to be a novelist and write science fiction and fantasy books, and like I realized I'd never gone into a Barnes and Noble and like picked up a book and looked at the back of it and thought, what kind of degree does this writer have? Can I trust that
yeah.
this is a good? But no, it's like you can do it or you can't.
Right.
Um, so all of that to say, I diverted from the path, but not because it wasn't fun, and not because like I think theater was one of the most fun things I did in college.
One of my IRL players, she's literally was in community theater. Yeah, I was laughing at that. That got me.
For those, for those listening on the radio or whatever, I studied Black Lodge Game says I studied pretend all the way through university, got to New York and realized I hated actors. Actors really are cattle, man. They just are.
Yeah.
Sorry, actors.
Well, one of my players, like she does community, like she did community theater, like she did a play, and like me, like all of us went to go to this play. So it was a bunch of like, I'm a like pretty like maybe a little bit older millennial. I'm not like the oldest millennial, but so we're like in our 30s. But we are by far the youngest people in this little community theater. Like everyone's like 80, and it was just a group of us. Like, and we had a blast. Me and my wife still talk about like it was one of the most fun date nights we ever had. So it was a great time. I really enjoyed it. There's something about it.
Yeah. When Romeo comes out with a walker.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah, she just decided that like one of my players decided she was like, I joined a community like play. I hope everybody makes it. We all did. So and we had a lot of fun. So it was a mess, but we had a good time.
All right. So all that to say, well, I was trying. You started off by saying that you were making concessions for theater kids, and then I just pretty much offended every last one of them with some help from Black Lodge Games.
Yeah. No, I was like, I do the carve outs, but all of the advice in Julia, oh man, all of the advice in the in the book, I sort of like all the advice that exists is for the theater kid, and it's for this very specific type of person who I don't even think makes up even slightly a majority. Like it's not even I don't know if they're even a plurality of kind of like the way people think.
Hang on a second. I'm getting some robot voice. Is your connection still good? Is mine? I don't know.
Let me check.
I don't know if it's on my end or yours.
I am hard blind, so I would be very surprised
if I was
experiencing something.
Let's just keep going. I'll assume it's me, and yeah, we'll see how good the closed captioning on YouTube can get.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Sounds good on stream. Okay, cool.
All right, cool. We'll keep going.
So yeah, so the my all that to say, like I just wanted to add something that was really kind of like that is more for a more analytical mind, for someone who enjoys kind of like having the charts, the spreadsheets, like kind of really getting into like how that works. Because I think this kind of style of game will excite kind of people's creativity who might not otherwise kind of be involved in that. Like it gives them a chance to role play in a way that kind of fits with them.
Yeah.
So they're not doing the monologues, they're not doing kind of like the heartfelt character scenes, but they get the experience of like leading an army from the front or manning the walls and encouraging the troops. Like that is a very different experience, I think, especially when because for those people, they need it tied to mechanics. Like it can't just be like, we're going to hand wave it and all the soldiers are mannequins fighting in the background.
Yeah. And I feel like the way that I have been playing since I've been invited to experience some of this Bro SR stuff, it definitely edges more towards the side of war game than to those theater moments. But they do show up too. Like you have times where I don't know if you saw on Wednesday, I recreated a moment where I had to offer mercy to a man who was attached to a tar baby and had tried to free himself with burning hands and like ignited himself. And I was an assassin. I was simping for the assassin grade. I was going to take him out, but like they wanted me to role play it in character. And so I was like very ridiculous, but
yeah,
I am team silly name and I'm team silly voice.
Yes.
Oh, speaking of team silly name, hey Purple Druid.
Hey,
how's it going?
What's going on, man?
Purple Druid's awesome. He's the one that told me, hey, you got to read Tony Bath. You got to read Henry Hyde. That kind of stuff.
Yes, we routinely, every time he posts it, I come in and start boosting it as much as I can. So.
Right on. And he is the progenitor of such bon mots as the Desert Swamp. That was him.
Yes.
I don't know if he's happy about that, but
he's a good sport about it. So
he is. He's a good guy. No, he's a really good guy. I've had him on my show, and like I've met with him just online just to talk about this stuff. Even when we weren't filming. So I'm glad you're here, Druid. What were we talking about, John? I'm sorry.
Sorry. What was the book? Who was the book for?
Yeah. Who was the audience?
So it is for the kind of the war game mindset. It is for the just pretty much anybody who is not kind of like into heavy role play.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably most people. I don't know. I wanted
to share something that I heard that made me more sympathetic to the theater kid mindset, though.
Sure. Yeah.
And made me feel like I understand a little better where Black Lodge Games is coming from, where they're like, hey, you guys, we're interested in all this other stuff, but you're missing some of the sweetest juice that you can squeeze from this type of gaming. I was talking to a buddy. He's actually a friend from church. He's in our Sunday school class.
Mm.
We used to be the young marrieds, but it's no longer. Anyway, he was into Civil War reenactment
Yeah.
and like would go to like the actual battlefields like in Virginia and stuff, and like these just giant reenactments where everybody had like the exact right period uniforms and
Oh
gear and
wow,
all that
cool.
stuff, and like they were camping, they were drinking out of canteens, like
Yeah.
they were digging, you know, like they were doing the real stuff.
Uh-huh.
And he was saying that in that community there's a everyone's waiting for the moment, like it doesn't happen every single time. It happens very rarely. But
Hmm.
like there is a moment that can happen when you're doing that where you just feel you slip into the past and you're actually there. And he
Hmm.
said he got that moment. Um he and his men had advanced and they'd fired off a round or a volley, and he was reloading his gun as fast as he could and he was focused on that, and the guy next to him grabbed his shoulder and said, "We need to go." And he looked up and he saw a bayonet charge coming over the hill down at him. And he
Yeah.
said that's when he had that moment that he just like forgot that they were playing and he was on the battlefield and he felt the fear of seeing an enemy charge.
Uh-huh.
And they just got their stuff and they skedaddled. And and then later on, everybody was like, patting him on the back and like, "Congratulations, man, you had your moment." And it was like a thing they celebrated. Yeah, okay, so I'm on the right track then. Black Lodge says that moment is what we're chasing.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like we had something similar with that battle I sort of recounted earlier.
Hmm.
Um, I am, I am a pro. I am also pro funny voice.
All right,
Um,
right on.
I actually I kind of saw the light on that maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. So like instead of kind of relaying like so and so says this and this is what they say and then they have to like kind of imagine how it said, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. It's like whatever, and it
Yeah,
was like it was fun. I was like I had
your
it like I enjoyed it.
your players will love it when you do.
Yeah. Oh, they have a
And like,
blast.
yeah, I'm trying to remember. We were playing Macho Mandolf was DMing, and he's from Australia, and we were trying to get him to do an accent. I think there's one of the intelligent swords that we found. Brigadine has a sword that is very powerful magic sword, but it speaks
Mm.
in Sean Connery's accent. So like
Oh, perfect.
listening to an Australian try to do a Sean Connery was hilarious, and we love it. Your players love it way more than you think when the DM does silly voices.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
it's great.
Bradford Walker's in the chat. He says, "I had a buddy that is still in ACW reenacting with the first Minnesota. He said that he had that moment too." Okay, so man,
Yeah,
it
it's
really makes
real.
yeah, it makes
It's
me think there's like this whole continuum from like tabletop war games to D&D to LARPing to Civil War reenactment to like I don't know how to host a murder. Like there's like this whole
yeah,
all these
yeah, yeah, yeah.
related grown up pretend games. I love it.
No, the LARPing is really interesting because like one of the my like acquaintances, he he got his start in LARPing. And we were trying to talk about 1-to-1, and I explained it to him. He goes, "Oh, we've been doing that in LARPing for years."
Yeah.
You know,
And
and
that's I never did LARPing, so like I'm
yeah, me
fascinated with
neither.
that.
Yeah,
I need
I
to
had
know
friends who did
more.
it. I had friends who did it, so it's like I'm not allergic to it, but so it's not really my bread and butter.
Wema says the Broasar has advocated for extreme silly voice RPing, so much so that the DM gets intimidated into acting the way the player suggests. And that's the real secret
That's
of the
interesting.
Broasar is intimidating your DM into doing what you need him to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the secret sauce, intimidation. Um,
Right on.
no. So yeah, so that's kind of, but that's who the game's for really is, because I do draw a distinction between kind of like what the critical role style like D&D and kind of
Mm.
what we're doing here, and what most people are doing, because that's like pretty heavily scripted to some extent. There's like whole
Yeah.
marketing campaigns right around these characters. It is a different beast altogether. Like that is not kind of what, but all of the advice seems to be like most of the advice, a good chunk of the advice seems to be how do you make a critical role game, and
Yeah.
that's not, and that I don't think that helps people.
Well, the show is wildly entertaining. Like I was happy for it when I was trying to learn because I was like,
Hmm.
here's somebody that can show you how to play D&D.
Yeah.
Um, but it does set a really impossible standard in that like everybody playing is wildly entertaining. They're all professional actors that are used to doing the voices, embodying the character, and playing off each other. Like just the fact that Matt could like tee up a scene and then not have to talk for a half an hour while they just take it. And I don't know, maybe
Right.
BLG has experiences like that. Maybe that's more of a LARPing thing, but I felt like players would want that, and I could not really give it to them.
No, no, and so like that's kind of what, and that's kind of what like the book is like, is trying to draw out that feeling without having to go to those lengths.
Hmm.
That's what I'm like kind of. That's also like at the end of the day, I actually might be chasing that too to some extent.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just I'm trying to provide like an alternative pathway to get there. That's all.
Who is this book not for?
Who is this book not for? People who are incurious people. It is not
Right.
for them. I have like it's if you're not willing to read a rhetorical defense of like insane war game stuff, then I have no patience. I have nothing for you. I'm not revising it. I believe in what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's my opinion. I'm not telling you it's my opinion because I'm saying it. You
Yeah.
know,
And
I
it's worth
don't have to
anything
disclose
worth
that.
saying is worth saying. How did Crossface put it? He said, "If I'm going to say it, I'm going to say it with a full chest, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you're not going to be, you're just going to get it out there." And it sounds like you have almost bent over backwards to take objections and alternate points of view in and put those in there as well. So it's like
Hmm.
if that's still not good enough for you, um, this was never going to work, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like if you can't, I really, it is argumentatively. I do think the book is argumentatively sound. What I'm arguing here is sound. It's not, it's not. There's this like a sincere effort that I do think kind of gets across because
Mhm.
I had. I'm not the only one who's read it so far. Like I've had other readers. I passed around to my friends and yeah, nobody has come to me and been like, yeah, but what about this? You know,
Mhm.
and I do like, I don't exactly, I wasn't exactly passing it out to yes men. These are people who have told me like, you need, like John, you need to figure some stuff out,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, so, but like, I'll read a little passage here if you, that's okay.
Please, please do.
Um, So, in the pages ahead, there will be no qualifying statements of "this is just an opinion." I hold a sincere belief in the utility of the advice within this book. This is not to say that those who disregard the following instructions are bad people, but that this method of play is perhaps not for them. Among the acquaintances, friends, and fellows in the hobby, a significant portion of them reject these injunctions out of hand. This author would challenge any whose immediate reaction is terse dismissal to reconsider and attempt to sincerely follow the suggestions contained herein before they loudly condemn. If the reader
Mm.
can honestly say that they or their players were unsatisfied with the results, then I have no choice but to respect my fellow GM's decision to refrain from permanent implementation.
Yeah, that's good. It's we got to remember that most people aren't going to react like the absolute unhinged people on Twitter will, right?
No, no,
Well,
no.
also recognizing that like I also become unhinged when I go on Twitter. Like that's part of why I go there. So,
Oh, you've always been a perfectly polite. I've never seen you say like insane things, so I don't know.
and but I'm still catching blocks and stuff. So who knows? Who
Yeah,
knows?
well.
I guess everyone's got their thing,
Hmm.
but yeah, I feel like especially if someone's making a good faith effort, like what you just shared with us, to say, hey, I've done this for myself.
Hmm.
I've played it. I've seen the difference that it makes. I mean, just the fact that you went from feeling burned out to having more interaction with your players and the burnout went away.
Hmm.
Maybe we covered this earlier. Would you say that just comes down to the nature of the interaction where creating solitary is hard work, whereas like just chatting with your bros online is easier? Is that the difference? Was it the downtime stuff or was it something else that made the difference in your burnout?
Yeah, so I touched on it a little bit, talking about like assets and liabilities and stuff. I won't go back into that, but
Please.
the the uh, no, what it does is, so all that time like that you spend, like you're doing your notes, you're doing all this stuff, you are a spigot, and the game is coming out of you, and they are collecting the game and imbibing and giving nothing back. And I, in Black Lodge, I try to be absolutely based in everything I do in my heart. So I mean, I'll stand by it. If people want to, say bad, like you say unkind things to me, that's fine. I don't care. But to just kind of finish the thought, so traditionally, when you are creating a session, you are creating the campaign, all that stuff is coming out of you, and they are imbibing, and they're giving nothing back to you. That's what the burnout. I'm going to just say that's I think where the burnout comes from.
Yeah.
Is the pure take, and this is not that's the way, but that's the nature of how it's organized. So what 1-to-1 does is the orders are not independent of themselves. The orders are all those notes that you were going to write. Those are the orders, and their players wrote it for you. Your players are sending you your session notes for next time.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is play them out. So that's why, like, even that is just like you need that to make zero prep possible. Because, like, it's not that there aren't notes; it's that you're just not the one writing them.
Yeah, and they need to get their shoulder under the load and help support, and they will enjoy that more than. I mean, this is a horrible image, and it's probably not accurate. But when you were talking about that give, to just a bunch, like I was just picturing a mama bird with a bunch of baby birds in the nest, just with their mouths open, and like,
yeah,
I feel like the times that I've tried to use these principles with people conditioned to play 5e, that's what I felt like is. I said, okay, here's all the stuff you can do. What do you want to do? And they just sat there with their mouths open, like, no, like, what's the one we're supposed to take?
Yeah.
Which hook is the one that you prepared that gets us to the big bad by the end of the night?
Right. And some players really like. I don't want to like paint it as this like miracle panacea that like that's going to change everything, because like some players really won't respond as well without like kind of those prompts. The point, like kind of what I'm saying, is that it almost doesn't matter. Like it's not. I don't think it damages enough. Damages enough, and what damages a campaign more than anything else? Burnout and the GM quitting.
Yeah.
Like it's either like they're either going to have to start picking up the slack, and if they're like have to start creating their own enjoyment, and if they don't, like that's not really your fault. Like, and it's really kind of unfair to expect the DM to kind of martyr themselves for because like the player is like, well, it's not as good as it could be. It's like, well, some of that's on you now.
Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely agree.
Yes.
Every player should be able to have an agenda separate from the DM and the other players. Brian Reniger says, yes, absolutely.
This is some deep stuff. I'm not sure how to phrase what I'm trying to think.
Sure.
How much of it should be on the players versus how much should be, because you're right. It's not just burnout, but it's that expectations that you as the DM in the conventional style owe me a good time. Like you need to create a story that both challenges me, but also recognizes how powerful and awesome I think my character is.
Yeah.
And you can see like this entitlement mindset in a player that like if they didn't have fun would totally blame the DM for it. It helps to have at least one kind of bellwether player who can lead the rest of the flock and show them what it's like to play with agency and kind of give them an example. If you're playing with a bunch of just little cheap birds with their mouths open, to say, well, I think we should do this. What do you guys think? And then how much troops do we need to go take that, orc palisade on the hill?
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually do allow for that. So I do kind of talk about in the 1-to-1 time. That was also like I felt was important to have in there, is that when you switch to it at first, if your players aren't used to it, there will be a period to where they do kind of seem like they're lost, and they might feel lost, and like they're not, like you might get some complaints, like, straight up, and like that's something that you can help. I try to give advice on like how to help them through that, kind of like the stuff around the first quest, like how that really should be set up to sort of like avoid the worst of that. Starting from the beginning, like that sort of thing. But
I got another horrible metaphor image in my head as you were talking about that. Like,
please.
did you ever see the movie Blazing Saddles?
Oh man, I actually haven't. I'm
Can we
embarrassed to
admit
say.
okay, well nobody that watches this channel would watch something like that. But there's a scene where the protagonist and his buddy are working on the railroad and they hit some quicksand and the crew chiefs just like throw a lasso and pull the rail cart out and they're sinking and like they just leave them in there. They don't care. It's a really horrible part of the movie.
Hmm.
Um, and at one point, Bart says, "Relax, my foot's on the rail." And I don't know why that jumped into my head, but just the idea that like people that are used to the DM has created the story and it's up for us to find the pieces that let us get to the next section, the next
Hmm.
cut scene, if you will.
Hmm.
They get all nervous in the quicksand when you're like, here's the world, go nuts, and they don't know
Hmm.
where to go or what to do. But
Hmm.
if they get like an idea, oh, here's where we're supposed to go, my foot's on the rail, we can relax. And then like it's they long for the railroad, at least in some ways.
Yeah, and some players will, especially if they're not used to it. You know,
And that's why the min-maxing is so important up front when they're creating their character. Like
Mhm.
it gets lamented and bemoaned by DM saying, "Oh, I got a min maxer. He's trying to just get um every advantage he can." But it's like the way that modern games are set up. That's like the most agency they have. That's why they write 4-page backstories
No, that's a good point.
in the desperate hope that you as the DM will take that and fold it into the story. Because once the game starts, all of the weird, crazy stuff they could do is done. Now they're locked into a certain optimal play style. They're locked in to try and find the breadcrumbs that leads them further in the story that's
Right.
been determined apart from them.
Right.
And it's a very weird dynamic shift to try the stuff that you're advocating here of like, no, this is your world. Go out and claim your piece of it and turn it into what you want it to be.
Yeah.
It's intimidating, but once you get past that, it's like this is the promised land of what this game was. This was the promise the game has always had that you can do anything.
Yeah.
All right, I
No,
did
right.
not mean to just soapbox there, and you are totally the choir that I'm like preaching to here. But I just had, as you were talking, I mean, this is why you guys need to get this book. Just talking with a guy, I'm getting like these grenades going off in my head, and I have to express them.
Yeah, well, good. That's the hope. I try to be, I try to talk as good as I write. We'll see how good that is. It'll be the court of public opinion. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely agree because, I just try to like, as much as like I push 1-to-1, I do try to have that caveat so that if the person like at the first encounter of negativity, they're not like, oh, well, this doesn't work. Like
Yeah,
it's like, no, I try to encourage them like, no, you're gonna encounter this, like potentially some players just take to it. Like my online group, I was like, I drop 1-to-1 and they're like, okay, well, I want to rule a kingdom and I want to start a mafia and I want
right
to,
on,
you
right
know,
on.
and they just immediately went nuts. And there is actually some sort of like a few of them were theater kids, and I think that sort of like they did have like improv and they got to use it. So it's like
If you
that's
could
like,
have both, man, that's
oh
like the
yeah, it's
Shangri-La.
great. So like my more kind of professional technical group and IRL, like they struggled. They struggle. I mean, to this day, they still kind of struggle with it a little bit. But I told them like, no, like, do you like playing? Or like, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, you're gonna have to kind of figure out how you want your character to progress. I don't know what to
Yeah,
tell you otherwise, because it's like we won't have a game. If you are gonna really kind of require this of me.
yeah,
And they were there, and to their credit, they're like, no, like we really like playing, and they show up every time and all that stuff. It's just the downtime. They're like, they haven't really needed it because like a lot of them are pretty like, okay, we get into the game and we just like to go into dungeons and kill monsters and take loot, and then we go spend it on stuff. And so the most I get really is like shopping lists, and
hmm.
they might be like looking for new quests or whatever, but they're not super interested in like some of the. They're
I
really more
wonder
into
though,
hack
like
and
if they
slash.
start to see other players that make better use of downtime, if that will like light a fire when they see, okay, the elite guys are actually getting ahead because of their
Mhm.
downtime as much as what they play in.
And I think some of it too might be a consequence of Pathfinder, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
So, like, to unpack that a little bit, uh, Pathfinder requires like Pathfinder puts a lot on the player's plate as far as like how to like run their character. feats, class abilities, skills like this. Like they have a pretty extensive skill list. They're kind of keeping track of all these things. I got a few players who just really hate that, and when I require like rolls and downtime or whatever, they're like, no, I don't want to deal with it. Like I only really want to deal with it around the table as far as that goes. I think AD&D actually will be much better for that.
Yeah.
I think they will become more active. I think the foundational system was a bad fit for this particular for a few players. But anyway, that same group had the Lord who was running that castle. Anyway, sorry.
Okay. No, not at all. I did want to get to Bradford's chat here. He says the passivity of far too many players and their insistence upon the referee making things happen is why I argue that video games and board games do conventional play better than current edition does. So that's kind of a spicy take. What do you think about that?
I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, I still play Baldur's Gate. I mean, if you want to really get down to brass tacks, Baldur's Gate was my first instance, like my first inkling that AD&D was actually pretty cool.
Oh, okay. Like you mean first edition or Baldur's Gate 1?
Baldur's Gate 1, which is second edition.
Second edition. Okay.
Which is second edition.
I've never played any. I bought the latest one because I was like, all right, a D&D game just got Game of the Year, and I was talking to people at work that were gushing about it. But I got this other game called War Tales, and I feel like
War Tales is great.
If I start Baldur's Gate 3, I probably will be done with War Tales. So maybe I should get all the fun I want out of War Tales first, and then I don't know. I might hate Baldur's Gate 3. Who knows?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate 3. Like I got to the city, and I just sort of the city of Baldur's Gate, and I just sort of like lost interest. And I actually started to, I went back and kind of continue to play through Baldur's Gate 2.
There you go. You're like, this makes me long for the original.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's kind of what it really did. Like, I mean, obviously, it's very high quality. A lot of production went into it, but again, something about 1 and 2. I mean,
right, and got several lore characters killed in the first 3 hours.
No, that's hilarious. What? I know it is extremely reactive. I will not criticize it. Like,
well, and I vaguely remember, I wasn't super into it when it first came out, but like a lot of people were saying that like this is the first time a lot of 5e players have actually had to play 5e with a computer that will not fudge their dice rolls, will force them to actually play the game, and a lot of them didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, this game's too hard. Like I saw a lot of that kind of like floating through. All my online players are like kind of avid gamers, so they all got it. But they're to their credit, they're extremely devout to kind of the rules, even like kind of even under a conventional frame. Like I actually had a guy die in downtime today. He got jumped by rogues, and they were tailing him, and he decided to challenge them in the like all together, and they jumped him, and he kind of got stabbed to death in the street.
Oh man!
So
how did the player react when you found out about it?
He was like, well, how it goes. I was rolling in the open, so he could see that I wasn't like,
this is Chinatown, Jack.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. It actually happened in a player's domain. So the other player got like, hey, guess what? The church is like complaining that people got shivved in your streets. So yeah, so now there's like a search party like looking for the guy's body so they can resurrect him.
Right on.
So
Planet Tobor TV says B3 is a mega achievement, very slick. It also made me very tired. I had to make so many micro decisions across every character as they leveled up. I burned out on it pretty fast.
That's fair.
That's one of the things. That's one of the things about video games. Like I got addicted to Destiny 2, and I had to like stop playing all video games for a while to deprogram my brain. And somebody warned me, you better be careful or you might get another addiction to replace it. And
yeah,
now I'm
it's
got a YouTube channel and I'm playing this one, so maybe I don't have room to talk about video games being addictive. But where was I gonna go? I wasn't just trying to overshare there. I had a point.
I want to comment a little bit on Black Lodge's thing about getting to Act 3 and losing interest. That it's a problem. You get to the city and Yeah, you get to the city, and yeah, things get a little
Yeah, so
a little,
Destiny was a gateway
little
drug
boring.
to the hard stuff, I suppose.
Yeah, well,
And this is the comment of the week right here. Macho Man says, "Died in downtime might make a good T-shirt."
uh,
And
yeah, Macho Mandolf. That is not his first character to die in downtime. That's like his third. So
you should do a one shot with all the characters that had an off screen death. You know, like maybe have them like fight their way out of the afterworld to see if like one person can come back or
get.
something.
Oh yeah, no, I that would be pretty good actually. It would not be bad.
So you're telling me he's the D&D equivalent of Kenny from South Park?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's like there's something charming about it. Like I don't know, because I mean, resurrection's there, so like they're like,
Yeah,
oh, they're annoyed, but it's rare that they're ever in a situation that like you can't either recover the body. Like this particular way, they were not able to recover the body, but sort of to do the specific circumstances of the shanking, he's not like the body is there, and they're just got to find it. And
yeah.
it's like it's turned into a quest for the other players. Like it's actually been pretty cool. They're like hunting these like injured thieves.
So your guys had a okay time with just dying off screen.
Yeah, they're really
You've
good sports about that.
you've made a lot of changes, and it sounds like both of your tables have been there for it. Like, have you had anybody flame out or get throw the table over and walk away?
No,
Wow,
no,
good for you,
and
man.
they're both very different. Like in their mindset, like I said, like one's super active in downtime. Downtime is time for shopping for the other one. Like they don't
Yeah,
really do anything with it, and it's fine. Like it's still having time progress, even if they're not going to use the downtime orders. Having time progress is still important. It's still powerful.
I must just play with jerks. We've had a couple flame outs.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't like maybe maybe I'm just like lucky in that way. I just never had like they don't really that hasn't really happened.
You should play in a game with Jeffro.
I'd be interested. Like
I'm just
I'll be
kidding,
honest.
Jeffro. I'm just kidding. If you're watching this,
I'd be pretty intimidated actually. But I definitely would enjoy sitting in, and then maybe I'll jump in.
right on, man. Bradford says the other thing that's been great to see is player-generated setting lore making the world coming alive. I've said
Yes.
that official settings are how a lot of RPG problems start. And yeah, on Twitter, I had I can't remember who I was snarking off to. Somebody said something like they were asking about like what official setting was the most D&D or something like that. And like my little snarky jab was if it's not a setting that you and your players have created together, it's not real D&D. Which
Mhm.
sometimes I do say things that should get me canceled, I guess. Um uh Macho Mandolf. Worst I've had is in one day PC died in downtime, PC died in session, hireling died in session. I think I know who that player was.
I
They were
mean,
all if it's the guy I'm thinking of, they were probably all dwarves.
the nothing will harden you like just extreme loss.
And then your
you know.
buddy's saying, "Get good, bro."
Yeah. It's like skill issue.
Oh man.
What were we saying? Uh,
Um,
you were on a
I don't know.
yeah.
My opinions aren't important here, though. You are the guest, and I do have more stuff I want to talk to you about with this book.
Sure. Yeah.
If you don't mind, like, what has been the publishing process like? Because I feel like, man, a lot of people probably have some good ideas and stuff, but it's like, okay, you're DM, so you're
Mhm.
running two parties in the same campaign. You got the session notes, and you're also writing the thing, and then did you have to learn publishing software like Affinity or Adobe? Did you have to get it in a certain way? What was working with Amazon like? Like what is all the extra that comes with just getting your ideas to the people?
So for my fiction, I will probably be using like actual software because there is like
Hmm.
a presentation kind of within the pages I think is important. Um, but with this, I pretty much just did it with Google Docs.
Right on.
Uh, um, yeah, I just did it with Google Docs because there's like it's basically it's instructional.
Mm-hmm.
And I have like kind of the proof like here and right in front of me, and I'm holding it up and I'm comparing it to say because it is really kind of spiritually like I tried to be like Tony Bath was a huge influence, so it
Oh, okay.
and his the inside of the book does not look any worse or really than his book.
Well,
So
it's all black and white, right? It's fonts and
yeah, it's like it's dry, it's instructional. I just used the font, it was fine. So yeah, I just did Google Docs. And then as far as working with Amazon, like it's pretty easy to get involved with their direct publishing. I did end up kind of getting my own ISBN because
okay,
it's pretty easy to get lost kind of in the shuffle if you kind of don't have that.
right
Um,
on.
um, and technically, I have a sole proprietor publishing company with an author of one, which is me. That I am both my own publisher and my own uh, uh,
Okay.
author.
Did you
So
did you just get a DBA for that, or did you start an LLC, or
yeah, I just did an LLC, and I wanted to have something to kind of like, you know,
here
I
we go
wanted,
talking business again? I'm sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. I kind of did an LLC, and I just wanted to have
Yeah,
something
right on.
um, to imprint, but it just kind of helps with like the Amazon algo, is what I was told. I have a few kind of like fairly successful like independent author friends, and they were sort of able to kind of like talk me through some of this stuff.
Yeah, well, and the thing is I mean, if you think Twitter is bad, when you publish something, like J.K. Rowling had people coming after her saying you ripped off my idea, and I'm
Sure.
going to sue. And it's like you never know what's going to happen. It's good to have your private life stuff, finances protected from crazy, litigious, crazy people that'll come after you financially.
Yes.
The worst you can do if you've got a company like that is you can lose the royalties to the book or whatever, but they can't come for your mortgage, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And that's what I was thinking when I did it. Kind of like just sort of like protection. Um, so kind of, I was already kind of familiar with starting an LLC because me and a buddy started a bookkeeping company in college to kind of like have like a side hustle going.
Yeah.
But other than that, so yeah, like that's kind of how I did it, and that's kind of and the Amazon kind of direct publishing process isn't really that hard.
Oh,
It can be
cool.
annoying in some ways, but I'm just kind of doing I'm using them as kind of the distributor printer. Um, but I own all the rights. Like I could publish it other places and stuff, which is
Hmm.
also why I wanted to have my own ISBN.
Right
Um,
on.
so
So you wrote it, you formatted it,
mhm, edit
any
it.
edited it. Did all those, or did you send it to an editor, or did you have proofreaders and stuff? You
I
said
had
you
proof.
shopped it around your team, right? Or your players.
Yeah, yeah, I shopped it with my players. And but yeah, I didn't. Otherwise, like there was nobody paid. It was just me, like all the way top to bottom. So, as far as like actually editing it and all that stuff.
Okay, and
So,
then at what point did you start thinking about the cover?
um, well, I knew it was going to be a thing I had to do eventually, and I knew I was going to commission Mr. Christopher Cant again. Um, so he actually did my profile picture. I commissioned this from him several years ago. Um,
Right on.
so
Let me look you up on Twitter, and then I'll share it so everyone can see. I think it's a very evocative cover. Like
mhm,
I dig it. So let
yeah,
me just look you up first, and then
sure. Well, maybe I should have it here. I could put it in the tray.
yeah. If you click on the present button in the middle, you can put in the train. I'll pop it up on there. Um,
Uh, present. I have video file and share screen and slides.
yeah, do share screen and then see if it lets you pick a window instead of your home monitor. Um,
Oh,
Otherwise, we'll see it down here in the tray before I pop it up there. So we'll make sure nothing gets shared that you don't want to see. In the meantime, I'm going to have to acknowledge R Dubs's spicy comment. That's because she wrote. He's talking about J.K. Rowling about elementary school wizards. Creepy ass stuff.
fair enough. Select a window. Yep, I got it right here. Allow.
So it was like, oh man, look at that. Was the cover the first thing that you wanted to commission, like knowing how long it would take, or was this like,
Hmm.
okay, by the time I've got I've got like my third draft or whatever. Now is the time to start thinking. Like, when did that enter into the?
I started thinking about it. Probably by the third draft.
Okay.
So I got the initial manuscript, which is basically just word vomit onto a Google Doc, and uh, I compiled I kind of wrote the chapters like as they came to me.
Hmm.
Um, and after I finished a chapter, I'd open a new Google Doc and I make a new chapter. And then I had to figure out the order in which I wanted to place all these chapters, and then I compiled them in kind of like a mega document. And then once I kind of got to that point, once the mega document appeared after several iterate, like that was the 2 to 4 editing like goes, I ended up like, okay, we're gonna need cover art pretty soon, because I pretty much just used like the good king in my profile picture as like a placeholder cover
Hmm.
uh, for a while. So because I was ordering physical copies, because I was trying to get I had to check the formatting to make sure that was right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I actually did the initially I did it through Barnes and Noble, because they have like a printing service you could just use without any sort of like commitment.
Oh, wow.
You just load it in a PDF and then you throw in like the cover and back, and they'll just print it for you. They don't care, like ISBN or no. So
That's crazy. That's
yeah,
great.
so Barnes and Noble has that. So that's how I kind of got the formatting. That's how I
And
did the formatting.
what was the name of the artist again? Just in case people are interested in this style.
Christopher Kant. So Christopher spelled the way you think, and Cant. It might be Kant. I've never heard him say it.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Cool. And so, like, how much did you describe versus just let him go with the concept? Like, what was it that you gave him to get this result?
so I drew a very crude version of this in MS Paint with stick figures and the box shape tool, and labels that said tree. Um,
I love
and,
it.
yeah, no, I had a very strong image of like what I wanted the scene to look like. So I sent him sort of references for the armor, for the helmet, kind of like the class of the individual here. I knew I wanted him thinking man posing into the fire. I knew
Hmm.
it needed to be in front of a dungeon. Um, and I knew it wanted to be sort of like a murky woods. Like I wanted it to be kind of like almost apocalyptic, almost a little bleak.
Yeah,
Um,
with that ominous. I don't know if that's a mountain or a temple or a mosque in the background.
yeah, and that's what
Huge.
that was his flourish. I did not ask him to do that. He was like, "Oh,
Okay.
I just put more dungeons in the background because it just seemed appropriate."
Nice. Yeah, there's a
And
tower in the mid ground. It's
"That's really
this is
cool,
a
man."
great piece. So how you were probably how did you feel about it when you saw this?
Oh, I was like, "Oh, this is great. No notes." Like,
Yeah,
there's a kind of an initial perspective thing that we had, and I let him know. He's like, "Great," and he moved it, and it took him like a day to move the dude
nice.
like to where I needed him. Then all these little flourishes, like the dude on the pin to the tree here.
Hmm.
That was him. The gold down by the dungeon entrance, like there's a little gold
Yeah,
pile there. That was his. Uh, it was better than I could imagine, because it basically captures every part of the book in the cover.
yeah.
You have
Well,
the
even
adventurer
that
going.
root, that like ominous, like twisting root coming off the ground is
Hmm.
vaguely threatening. I
Yeah,
love
and
it.
that's what I wanted to convey. So I was very very happy with the job he did. So, and we talked a little bit about it off stream, but I will be using him again to do the cover art. I am going to see about trying to revive a little bit of that 80s pulp style with his own flourishes on it. That
Right
is going to
on.
be for my fiction.
Excellent. Whew. So even if you were on the fence, you're like, maybe I want to buy the book, maybe I don't. Maybe I know some of this stuff, maybe I need to learn. Like just to have that sitting out on your coffee table, that's like gorgeous right there. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, the only promise I make is that it'll look good on your shelf.
yeah, right on. It'll look good on your shelf and it'll look good at your table.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so since you started playing in this new way,
Uh huh.
do you have any like standout stories that you want to share with the group? Like things that happened that were just either off the wall or super dramatic or crazy. I know when you went on Rolling Bones, he asked you about like your most memorable one, but like
Hmm.
one since you started adapting the living campaign, to the
Hmm.
way you play? Is there like a representative sample of what kind of stuff people can expect?
So it's a little more subdued. So like there was like the bombacity of the siege,
Hmm.
of the raids and all that stuff, and that stuff is cool. But it's not uh, it's one of those are treats. You
Yeah,
know,
it's not the bread and butter.
it's not the bread and butter. So I had an instance. So the dungeon, like going through the dungeon with kind of structured rules, um, in in a way that's not like, oh, I go here, I go there, and they're just kind of zooming through on this like theme park ride,
Yeah.
um, as kind of like the traditional way. There's like you have the time, like the minute, like turns, like dungeon. I call them dungeon turns in the book, sort of just
Hmm.
kind of a blanket idea, like to demarcate them from combat turns. Um, and so like I had an instance where I was doing dungeon turns, and they're like, oh well, like we again, these are my guys online. We've been gaming together for years. They've gone through, cleared many of my dungeons, so they're like, oh, we're just gonna go through one of John's dungeons, and they go down, and it's like it's going by turns. Like they're not sure if something's gonna come around the corner and get them, and they're slowly exploring. They're kind of going through. They had a few close calls. Like they opened up a door and there was like an illithid of some kind, like some sort of like
Oh
horrible
man.
Lovecraft monster.
Yeah.
Because and they're just like slam the door shut and run away.
Yeah.
And they cleared out a
No
few more.
thanks.
Yeah, yeah. No, slam.
I think
And
if this was story gaming, that would be rejecting the quest. That would be the step in the hero's journey where they're just like,
no, yeah, right, exactly. It's sad. Rejecting. It's funny. Took a second to click. Yeah.
Sorry,
So
I didn't
anyway,
mean to
we got.
derail you. I'm so distracting.
Oh no, you're good, man. So we got through it, and then we got to the end, and I had like Spotify going or whatever, so I had like the music, and we got
Hmm.
done, and they're like, okay, uh, so that dungeon was extremely unsettling. They were like, yeah, uh, a few of them admitted they'd never actually had a dungeon crawl that was like actually engaged them like that.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's tense. They're not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, the
Um,
question mark and the feeling of danger. Yeah.
mhm. One of the like made the point. It was like, yeah, a dungeon crawl like this is a distinct style. Like that's what
Yeah.
they like the way they described it, which felt really good, because like the point of art is to feel things. So
That's a great quote. The point of art is to feel things. And a dungeon crawl, like when I was playing 5th edition and I was used to the grand story and that way, I was just like, why would people want a dungeon crawl? That must have been like just it
mhm.
seemed to me at that point to be the most basic thing we grew away from. Like, well, they didn't know what they were doing back then.
Yeah.
So they just all they had was this dungeon game. They didn't realize how huge the world could be and how big the stories were and how it could all actually be Tolkien. And I was totally missing that. They talk about the 3 pillars of role play,
Yeah.
exploration, and combat. And in a dungeon, you're really hitting the exploration hard, and there's that constant threat of combat
Mhm.
and that building sense of dread and anticipation. And like role play is not it's not like in that scenario, role play is like something you do so that you either have time to run away or you don't have to fight or you can negotiate. Like it's
Mhm.
all about survival, and it's way more visceral and immediate than I was thinking of when I was used to playing the other way. I just thought it was like this old stuffy way of doing it when it was like before we'd figured out the game, right? And I didn't
Yeah.
realize no, this is the primal stuff. This is the you're going down in the dark and all you got is a torch and there's riches down there, but it won't be easy to haul them out. Um,
I uh I in the book I describe it as the inclusion of dungeons and kind of contemporary rule sets as a vestigial habit of publishing. Like
yeah,
because it is sort of treated that way as like, well, this is the way we've always done it, so we have to do it.
yeah,
Like
got to put the 10-foot pole on the gear chart, even though nobody knows what it's for or why they'd want one, right?
yeah, it was a little weird. It was a little weird. And it just didn't like my under like I haven't actually read the 5e DMG.
Oh,
Crossface kind of puts out some stuff on it every now and then, and I'm like, why? Well, that's in there. Interesting.
Well, most 5e players haven't read it either.
Yeah. None of
So
my friends have, and they kind of,
there's way
you know.
more in there than we give it credit for, because people that don't go crafty mad on it and RTFM, they miss
Mm,
a lot of the valuable stuff that is in there that people assume isn't because nobody actually plays it.
yeah,
Bradford, we don't know why, but we've always done this way, is the definition of a cargo cult, right?
yeah.
Yeah, if I
Funny.
buy the right module and I do all the right rule zero dice fudgy things, then fun will manifest, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to describe it, Bradford. So I kind of have experience like supervising a team, and one of the things I try, I'm very kind of results oriented, like when I'm managing people, and a surefire way to make me like go berserk was to be like, well, we've always done it this way, and like plant your feet. I would just go absolutely insane to be like write ups, and like I'd send people home. I was like, I did not care. Oh gosh, it's like I have very few things that like set off my temper, but that is one of them. So I have kicked people off my shift. So they're like, "Well, you're gonna be like, there's gonna be a rush, and you're gonna be out of." I'm like, "I don't care. You're useless to me. Go away."
Go home and think about what you just said.
Yeah, like just leave. You're like you're. It's better without you. Is you know.
If I was
Um,
Vader, I would have force choked you by now.
yeah, it's really it is a yeah. It bugs me so much to be like, well, we've always done it this way. I don't know. I
Yeah.
really hate that. I really hate that. It's just an excuse to like not ever improve. As
Yeah.
if as if improvement is over. We've found the perfect way. It's like,
Well, and we
yeah,
found an even better, like an even more irritating than we've always done it this way, is nobody ever did it that way. That's even more irritating. It's like, well, they
all the
put
more
it in
reason
the
to
rule book.
try.
Yeah, yeah. They put it in the rule books. Yeah, but they didn't mean it because nobody ever did it. It's like, well, I don't care what they meant. I don't care what they did 2 seconds after the ink dried on my copy of this book.
You know,
I'm gonna play this. I'm gonna do the play test, and I'm gonna try it the way it's written. And people lose their dang minds about it. I don't get it.
yeah, I don't really understand it either. I mean, so I do think some of that might be, like, especially when you get an earlier edition, some of that might be a function of kind of the technology and the ways of communicating at the time.
Yeah.
Um, so because like the people still like poop, like they get on about like segments.
Hmm.
Like I was watching a video today, and there was kind of like, oh yeah, segments way too complicated, and it's really not. Like it's just sort of like Gary talks about like how they're structured and what they mean, but really it's like you want to narrow it down. It's like most of the time I don't really think about the segments.
Yeah.
It's like I need to think about the segments at specific sort of times. But
Well, you and I share a commonality in our origin story in that we both kind of got to thinking about this one-to-one time thing from a video that Questing Beast had out.
hmm
And I mean, what do I want to say about that? I enjoyed his content when I was fascinated with the OSR.
sure.
He was my main, like it was him, and I was reading 10-Foot Pole's blog.
hmm
And the upshot of that period of my gaming life was that I just bought a bunch of indie modules that I never played.
Sure. I mean, I have a shelf full of them too.
Yeah,
I know exactly what
and
you
I'm
mean.
sure they're awesome. Um,
I bet. I
and
wouldn't know.
a lot of people in the Brostar got a little upset with him because he was using their language.
Yes.
He was talking about one-to-one time, and you could say, well, he was reading first edition, so that's understandable that he found that because it's in the book. But when he
Mhm.
said the always-on campaign, some
Mhm.
folks took umbrage that he didn't mention Jeffro at all, because it's like Jeffro comes up and says, "Here's what you want to do," and just catches nothing but flack, like just beat down for even suggesting it until he becomes this bitter bully. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just I'm just letting Jeffro have it. No,
Ah,
but and then someone else comes in and just like, oh, look what I just discovered, and doesn't acknowledge the guy that's like taking a whooping for even sharing the idea in the first place, using his very language. But the other thing that Questing Beast did, and I'm not trying to throw shade at him, but like um he did something that I was very excited about, in that he was like, I'm just gonna read the DMG.
I watched those streams. I remember.
And I would listen to that while I was mowing the lawn, and I loved it. But
Uh-huh.
like the whole time he was reading it, there's this almost like, I don't know, he's like laughing and like um dismissing and like, oh, Gary's crazy. Look at this, what he's saying.
Yeah.
And like that attitude, I felt like really I don't know, it soured me on the guy. And I don't wanna I shouldn't say it soured me on him as a person. It soured me on his take on the original. I felt like the people that approach this not the way that I did when I thought dungeons were quaint, but like that
Mm.
have, come on your knees, come humbly, look at it for what it is and what you can learn from it. And then you can feel smug and superior and snarky if you've managed to understand it. But if you haven't grokked it yet, you can't just make face and be like, oh, isn't this silly? I don't get this. It's like understand it deeply and then like realize you may have jettisoned the very most valuable parts of this hobby. And that's what
Yeah.
people do not want to hear.
No. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of like, so it was interesting. Well, first off, the algo kind of picked him up, and put him
Yeah.
in my face. So that was sort of my first, I was sort of like tangentially around the OSR around that point, just like I was, getting the modules or whatever. Um, yeah. Sorry, I got distracted.
Was it because I put Bradford's quote up? Let's
Yeah,
just acknowledge it.
yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
started reading it. Go ahead.
He said we went at QB for that because we had people trying to bad faith steal control over the conversation. I gotcha.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they did it poorly. Is really the
Hmm.
problem because like as soon as I got kind of through those videos with that, because I didn't know, because obviously like I didn't know who like Jeffro was, I didn't know who the Brosar was,
Yeah.
so I go like, okay, what's this 1-to-1 time like I immediately saw the utility.
Yeah. It seemed
Immediately.
amazing as soon as I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah, like once I knew it existed, I was like, no, I need to know more about this because it is not quaint. There's something here, and
Hmm.
that's when I started like, okay, well, let's look this up. Who else is talking about this? And that's kind of where that's kind of how I kind of stumbled on.
Yeah. I feel
Um,
like we had the same path. It was like questing beast led right to Mollis and the
mhm,
joy of
yeah,
wargaming, and
yes,
then I was hooked.
yeah, yeah, because I was like, I was already kind of so it's weird. I was already kind of aware of Joy of Wargaming because I was trying to learn how to play chainmail at the time.
Oh, okay.
So, but then I was like, oh, he also has videos on 1-to-1 time. That's really interesting. So, that's when I kind of went into that.
Well, and
Um,
like the Broasar has done a good job with like the slogans that get under people's skin, but also get reach. Like
mhm.
the "You can win at D&D." My goodness, does that generate buzz? I'll put
I
it that
don't,
way.
I don't like even trying to like kind of build a theory of mind for the people who like hate it. Like I still don't really understand the sort of the vitriol, like the venom for it. Because like even if I don't feel that like when they say you can't win at D&D or like everybody win, like when they do kind of their like rebuttal, like I don't
If
feel
you
anything
had
at
fun,
all. I
you
think they're
win.
wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't like it doesn't make me mad. I don't sit there and seethe. I don't quote tweet
yeah,
them like go nuts. Like it's just like okay, well like you're incurious. Moving on. Like that's just
yeah,
kind of my attitude toward it. Like I don't. So I seriously I have a really hard time like trying to understand like what exactly they're on about when it comes up.
yeah. And Brian says, and they hadn't played what they were trying to control.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's
And
the other thing that's infuriating is if you've sat at a table where you've done this stuff and seen how good it is, and you
mhm.
get excited and you try to share it, and people are like, "Well, that can't work." Like, what
You're
do you
like,
mean it can't work?
no, no, actually, you can't say that to me. This is not like
Yeah,
you're theorizing. I have like, no, I've done it. I'm like, you're like this gaslighting. You're gaslighting me.
yeah. It's like
Like,
Black Panther. You do not speak here.
yeah, you are. Yeah, like you're. This is literally like, yeah, this is. You're trying to drive me insane.
Yeah.
It's like form of psychological torture.
Yeah. R Dubs looks like he was on the same path as you doing chainmail research.
Yeah, I was just like, there's like, because I was hell bent on making mass combat fun. I don't know. I just got a bug up
Yeah.
my bonnet like one day, and it wasn't even like on the horizon. I was like, no, we need mass combat. Like I just for whatever
Yeah.
reason I just woke up
Well,
and
it
needed it.
seems like in a game that's designed to emulate the genre, mass combat should be easier to get there. And
Hmm.
if you're playing conventional play, the spotlight never leaves the small party. You're always playing Star Wars, but you're never playing the war. right?
Yeah.
It's always Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie and C-3PO and R2D2 just running around somewhere,
Hmm.
and the spotlight never leaves that party. And this living campaign, the spotlight can't stay with one party. It's like, no, the world is the main character, and you got to try and find a way to adjust it to where to your bend it to your will, and it
Yeah.
will chew up and spit out your characters along the way until you get good enough to master the world. You have to be worthy to write your name across the stars. You don't. It's almost like the difference. There's a meme. I'm gonna butcher it, but it's like the difference between the masculine and the feminine fantasies,
Hmm.
where the girl is told, "Oh, you're secretly a divine sorceress, and you've had the power all along, and you just needed
Yeah.
to believe in yourself."
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
like the male power fantasy is the dude approaching the other dude saying, "I'm gonna hit you with this stick until you can take it away from me."
Yeah. I know exactly. It's like the two Nordic Chads.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
like,
I'm gonna
okay.
I'm gonna beat you with this stick until you can take it away from me. And it's
Yeah.
like the living campaign is the second. It is the masculine version where it's like you
Yeah.
don't this world will not pull its punches, and you're gonna lose characters until you figure out how to be hard enough to make it um conform to your will, as opposed to the everything is set up for you to succeed, and maybe someone will die and we'll have a dramatic scene and everyone can cry about it.
Hmm.
But you're not going to have a TPK in critical role style play
Yeah. Well, I
because
mean, just think of the marketing that they've put into like these characters. You can't have a
yeah,
TPK. Like, oh, it's gonna ruin the
yeah,
commercials that we got set up.
we've got our animated series coming out. We're gonna have action figures. You can't.
Yeah. You can't do this. You can't, like, I imagine like every time a character goes down, the marketing team is just like losing their minds. Like I can imagine what that's like. I don't envy them in their jobs.
Bradford says, I have
Major
noticed
long
the
house
feminine
back,
nature of
yeah.
the naysaying Major Longhouse. We're totally getting canceled for this. You realize I'm so sorry, John. I brought you on here. Uh, the only good news is it's such a small channel that nobody will actually see it. So maybe we'll get away with it.
Well, I don't know. Like I'm married. My wife loves me.
Yeah, I'm an MBA. He's an accountant.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it's all good. It's whatever. I'm doing
Yeah.
this for fun. So,
Yeah, Purple Druid said
um,
mass combat is easier than anyone expects.
yeah, I just like it once I like learned it, it was just like, oh man, like it felt, it was like staring me in the face the whole time. I Yeah, and to your point about like the players need to get good at like, right, like I do kind of like, I make that, I was trying to find it in one of my chapters here, but I do make the distinction, I do make the case that the players will attempt to impose their will on the world and the world will resist them.
Yeah, right,
A-
right on.
a- and that's where the drama comes from. That's where the dramatics comes from. That's where like that immersive thing that we're all chasing, the kind of the actor moment. Like there's
Hmm.
plenty of actor moments to be had. uh, Oh, I got another kind of memorable moment is like my online players had their alternates, like their lower level alternates that went down into a dungeon,
Yeah.
and they sort of accidentally completed a cult ritual to summon a demon lord. Um,
Whoops.
yeah, and like, and legit, like I when I knew that they were going to be down there, like I rolled kind of like who was going to be populating this dungeon, like kind of thing, and I was like, okay, well, why are they down here? They're probably trying to summon something, and okay, well, this is what they would need to do to complete it, and it wasn't like easy. I don't understand how they were like, oh, I'm just going to do this. I'm like, well, congratulations, you completed a ritual summoning. And they did everything appropriately. Like they had the proper sacrifices.
Oh
Like,
man.
and it was legit. Like it was like a Monty Python sketch where they just sort of stumbled into this like dumb stuff. They're
Was
just
this your in real? Was this your real life players, or was it your online?
online.
Okay, but did they have their cameras on? Could you see their face when they realized they had completed it?
No, we didn't play with cameras on. I just heard that like it just went dead silent because it was just the one player that actually like got the final say, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, what do you? So we were like kind of in the alternate chat, and they're just trying to waiting to see because he's like in a trance, and they're like waiting to see what's gonna happen, and he's like, okay, well, he comes out of the trance, the demon comes out, and they're like, okay, Just like it says, I've been summoned. I'm going to topple the lord of this land, and I'm going to rule it as my own kind of material fief. And the person who rules the land is another player
Oh,
who is
nice.
in the party, and he's like, oh great, I think I just made a problem for myself. And it was very like
Okay.
dramatic, and it was suitably like they're super excited, but the character he's playing is like not particularly friendly with his like other like his lord character. So
Yeah,
like he
and that's
played
the
it
role
straight.
playing, right? You can have
Yeah,
two PCs that you're running that are at odds with each other.
I thought of the I kind of picked up the bits and pieces from one of the Brosar campaigns, like talking about like a player backstab his own alternate.
Yeah, yeah, that was Doranal. That was
Yeah,
amazing. I
yeah,
was
really
there
cool.
for that.
It,
Yeah.
it really reminded me of that because he's basically just like might have overthrown one his other character.
He could have. He was hiding in the shadows. We had defeated the part we had defeated the bad guys. He
Hmm.
wasn't really a bad. Well, he was kind of a bad guy. He had been. So you talk about what happens if you stay in the dungeon. There were characters that got stuck in the dungeon, and we had to leave them there. And what
Hmm.
happens is the big bad comes up and charms them, and they become his pawns. And so he was playing another character, and he was a thief, and he was hiding in shadows, and he could have just let his other character escape.
Hmm.
He'd run away from all of us. But as he was passing, he was like, Jeffro, I want to roll the backstab, and he took him to exactly 0, and the guy
Nice.
just dropped to the floor, and then we just kind of ignored him, and he bled out, and it was hilarious. It was like I was like, that is something I have never seen in a game
Yeah,
of D&D, is one character marking his own guy with a like sneaky backstab. That was
yeah,
awesome. It
yeah.
was
No, right.
awesome.
And it's like it's memorable. You remember it. Like like you have all the details. And that stuff happens. So like this like there is a certain like the criticism of like, oh, so there's just no story. It's like no, there is a story. Like your life has a story. Like you have events that happen in your life that have like that do have an arc in real life actually.
Yeah.
So like to it's like it's not insane that there will be dramatics that happen in the game kind of spontaneously.
And there's something about when the DM just rolls and sees the reaction or sees something that happens that like really puts the characters up against it, and they can just laugh because they're not being mean. They
No.
didn't they didn't design an encounter that had too high of a CR for you,
Yeah.
right? You
Oh
just kicked
man.
in the wrong door, and the table, the game, the rules in the game conjured up the thing that everybody, if they're a good player, should just close the door and run away from.
Yeah.
But if you're in the mindset that everything has been tailor made for my party so that we stand a chance, that's when you get your players killed. And that's when
Uh
you're
huh.
like, oh, this is a different game.
Yeah. 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 No, right. I like what Brian Reniger said there.
Go
Stories
ahead.
are a secondary effect of taking an action. Yes, exactly. I hadn't thought about it in that exact way, but maybe on an instinctive level, but almost definitely.
Well, think about what are the things that you and your players talk about afterwards,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, the
It's the
results.
it's the random stuff that just happened and everybody had to react and respond. And
Hmm.
uh and that's the stuff that, and like the things that you stayed up late and you wrote that was like this major set piece that you want them to talk about. You may not realize it, but when your bad guy's doing his monologue, or when your big thing explodes out of the volcano, or whatever the thing is that you were so proud of,
Hmm.
your players are mentally doing the same thing they do in a video game, which is mashing the X button, trying to skip the cutscene so they can play again. Right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so it's the critical role example that was given to me was one where it wasn't even Matt, it was Brennan something or other. He had a
Brennan Lee Mulligan.
yes.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not trying to take anything away from that guy because he is amazing at what he does.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah,
the
absolutely.
example of what
Provides.
they showed me, that like, hey, this is peak. He was, and it was like the climax of the whole campaign. I don't want to
Hmm.
be too critical, but basically, he was monologuing as the bad guy, and he was like picking up one of the characters and like ripping his face off and killing him and bringing him back to life and gloating, and like everybody was just sitting there with their mouth open and nobody was playing. They were just watching and listening. And I was like, that is not the way that this works. That is him being an awesome author or writer and dragging them through his story. Um, but like this, the stuff that we remember, the crazy off the wall things that just happened that nobody saw coming, like your ranger charges the giant white ape and he's got a pouch of crystals that we harvested one room before, and
Mm.
the ape just picks him up and runs off with him to make a meal, and we cast detect magic at the ape because we thought it was an illusion, and the
Oh, good.
crystal absorbs the detect magic spell and blows the smithereens out of both of them, and it's like one of the most horrible, spectacular deaths ever, and everyone just dies laughing at the table. Well, except for the guy whose guy died.
He's like a little probably
He was
sour
not
grapes.
cool with it. Remember how I said people flamed out? But like,
Oh man.
but it's like that's the stuff that happens that it's all on the players. The players set
Yeah.
that up. Their reactions created this bizarre, wonderful, horrible thing that happened, and that's what you're going to remember and tell your buddies about at work the next day. Not
Yeah.
the cut scene that everyone was mentally skipping.
So, and that's the thing. That's kind of when I talk about like kind of the specific species of player that kind of enjoys that kind of the monologue, because like you look at that, I look at that, and we go like, I'm not playing. Like they're not even playing. Like, what is
Yeah,
this? And but though that's their profession. Like so they're sitting around and it's like somebody shredding a guitar solo, like a
yeah,
bunch of musicians looking at something, and they're just like they're appreciating the craft of it. So that is fun for them.
yeah,
Is my
yeah. I'm not. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
point.
and that's kind of, but anyway, that's like that just kind of brings it around to my point of like why the book and books like this, like people need to be like there needs to be a corpus for people who don't necessarily appreciate kind of like acting chops.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
that
So it's like,
totally
yeah, like
makes sense.
it's an ingredient, it's a thing that can elevate a game because like everything kind of has its place, but like yeah, it's not the like the kind of the main course. It's a potpourri.
Right on. We have gone like usually. I don't know why I ever thought this was ever going to be an hour show, but like you've given us an extra hour and 11 minutes of your time.
Sure.
I really appreciate it, John. Thanks for coming on. I've had a blast talking with you on this show. Are there any final thoughts that you want to get out without me interrupting or distracting? Any,
No, you're good. I had a good time. So yeah, no, I had a lot of
good.
fun. Would definitely do it again. I'm looking through the book real quick. Uh, I mean, just kind of as a fun aside, I actually do have in the middle between part 1 and 2, I did include an example dungeon with example rooms and stuff. So I try to have like some images and add a
Oh
little.
yeah. Well, and the book is not just like paragraphs of theory. Like there are tables, there's advice on how to create your own maps, and it's an effective tool as well as being a good examination of the way to think about approaching these things. So, yeah, definitely, you guys should pick it up. If not, you're missing out. And yeah, let's do this again sometime, John. This was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Would be happy to.
All right, and for my dozen watchers, thanks for sticking with us. I hope you guys got something out of this. I know there's some like fire comments at the end here in the chat. I just didn't put them up there because felt like every time I did that, I like John was cooking and I just threw him off. So,
You're good. You're good. I mean,
I
they were
just,
good comments. So
yeah, these guys are hilarious. R Dubs is, I think R Dubs, I think you're oddly obsessed with my mustache. Like he didn't want to watch last week because the mustache was too short. He was like dogging on me when I didn't have any. You need the masculine aura just radiating off of the mouth brow in order to get R Dubs respect these days. But
that's
and
fair.
yeah, Bradford Walker, like the names that are there may not be a whole lot of viewers of this channel, but I feel like the quality of the people that show up are amazing. So we're grateful for that. If you like this and you're not already subscribed, feel free to click the button. And if I haven't offended you with any of my guests in the past, it's probably coming. If you want to give John and I some encouragement, feel free to click that like button. And definitely go check out the book. If you do pick it up, please remember to leave a review on Amazon to
Yes.
help our brother out. And
Would
yeah,
I plug some stuff real quick?
Please do, please.
Yeah. So I, in addition to the book, I am also on Twitter at McGowan John N. And I also have started a Substack, johnnmcgowan.substack.com, and that's mostly going to be kind of like adventure, like pulp fiction, my attempt at it, but I will be having kind of more long form D&D advice or just kind of like broader hobby advice when I have the time for that. So yeah,
Rock on, man. All right, looks like we got a couple more. It's just Druid and R-Dubs going back and forth. The title of the book, R-Dubs, is The Living Campaign. Let me the link to that. It is up on Amazon right now. So go ahead and click on the link that I just put in the chat. And if you're listening and you're not able to click on anything, it's on Amazon.com. Just look up Living Campaign. John McGowan should have it come up for you. R-Dubs, will the book get us, girls? No, as if you listen to 2 episodes ago on January 1st, I would tell you that D&D is socially repellent to most women. So you're gonna need to hit the gym, man. You got to do something to make yourself more attractive.
but you gotta. So when you're trying to get girls, what you got to do is you got to get to the gym. You got to have some interests that they might want to talk about, and then you spring D&D on them.
Yeah.
And then, like, once they're kind of invested in you, they're gonna want to do it too, because they're gonna want to like.
Well, you got to time it just right. Like when you're before you pop the question, she's still playing video games with you. You're still going on walks or picnics or whatever you do, and then like once you lock it down and get that ring, she'll stop playing the video games, and you're like, okay, I have something to confess. I play D&D, and you can too.
And she will start adopting your interests. Like, she may not have them at first, but she'll get there.
I hope that's a chapter in your book, because I haven't got there yet.
To some extent,
that would be worth the price of the book right there. That one.
Oh yeah, I didn't exactly include that. Maybe that's a new book I'll have to do. I think that's pretty well and truly covered. So.
Right on. And Bradford says all this goes up on my main blog tomorrow, including links to the book sales page. I appreciate that, Bradford. And if I haven't said it before on the air, Bradford has one of the best blogs on the interwebs. I have enjoyed his takes on a lot of different things. So definitely check that out too, where he collects himself online. So thank you guys for your time. It's really good being with you. Thank you, John, for coming on the show and telling us about just what this hobby means to you. And thank you for giving back with this book. And I hope it crushes and does well. And we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.